The Sorcerer, The Path to Transcendence starting from Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201 Emotional Expert. Sif walked at the front of the procession, her posture erect and unwavering. Her long black hair gleamed in the sunlight, a breathtaking sight. Her armor was even more exquisite, inlaid with gems and magic patterns, highlighting her noble status. In her hand, she held a long sword, its blade razor sharp. The people at the marketplace saw this procession and made way for them. Their eyes were filled with awe and admiration. They knew these Asgardian warriors were the protectors of Asgard and loyal warriors of the god King Odin. Sif's gaze swept through the crowd, quickly locating Weiss. She strode over to Weiss, nodded slightly, and said, "Wizard Erwin." Weiss nodded and replied, "It's me." Sif's face shifted to a serious expression as she said, "The God King has summoned you." Weiss had anticipated this and didn't refuse. "Yes." Sif turned and waved to the Asgardian warriors. A magnificent golden carriage, pulled by several majestic Pegasus horses, slowly emerged into view. The carriage shone with a dazzling golden glow, its body adorned with intricate carvings, every detail radiating luxury and nobility. The wheels rolled silently on the ground, as if the carriage were suspended in midair. Sif climbed aboard the carriage with a graceful and decisive movement. She then turned to Weiss and nodded, "Get in." Weiss hesitated for a moment before climbing aboard. The moment he stepped inside, he felt a sense of tranquility and comfort unlike any other. The carriage sped toward Asgard at lightning speed, yet its carriage remained perfectly composed. Weiss sat in awe at the marvels of Asgard's craftsmanship. He gazed out the window at the fleeting scenery, his heart filled with curiosity and anticipation. Weiss looked across at Sif, who seemed hesitant, as if he were about to speak. Weiss smiled faintly and said, "Ask whatever you want." Sif was taken aback for a moment, then a hint of shyness crossed her face. After a moment's hesitation, she finally mustered the courage to ask, "What kind of person is she?" Weiss immediately understood that the she was referring to was Jane. Weiss pondered for a moment and said, "I don't know Jane." Sif's eyes flickered with disappointment when she heard Weiss's words. She had expected Weiss to give her some information about Jane, but he hadn't expected him to know so little about her either. "But, in my opinion, Thor and Jane aren't a good match," Weiss suddenly said. Sif perked up, her eyes filled with surprise and anticipation. She couldn't wait to hear what Weiss had to say. "They don't have much in common. Thor is a warrior, and Jane is a doctor," Weiss explained. Sif didn't understand what the doctor meant, and a puzzled look crossed her face. Weiss quickly explained, "In other words, a scholar," and Sif suddenly understood. Weiss continued, "The biggest problem between them is their lifespan." Sif frowned slightly, unsure of what he meant. "Lifespan?" she asked doubtfully. "Lifespan, that's right," Weiss said slowly, leaning comfortably against the soft cushions. "When Thor was born, Jane's great-great-great-great-grandfather was nowhere to be found." Weiss's words plunged Sif into deep thought. Asgardians have extremely long lifespans, while humans are incredibly short. This is truly a huge problem. Decades pass in the blink of an eye for Asgardians, Weiss lamented. His words made Sif even more aware of the gap between Thor and Jane. A complex emotion crossed Sif's eyes, and she began to reevaluate Thor and Jane's relationship. Jane only appeared when Thor was at his most vulnerable and downtrodden. Their relationship wasn't pure love, and how long could such a love last? Thor is the future king of Asgard. An ordinary person couldn't become god queen, Sif muttered to herself. It was a simple truth, but Sif's excessive concern for Thor had made her overlook it. She had been so absorbed in her feelings for Thor that she couldn't objectively examine the relationship between Thor and Jane. Now, after Weiss's reminder, she suddenly understood. She realized that she could no longer blindly envy Jane. The Pegasus was very fast and soon arrived at Asgard. The magnificent palace stood in the clouds, exuding a powerful aura. Sif got off the carriage, and she had not yet recovered from Weiss's words. Her mind was still immersed in thinking about Thor and Jane, and her heart was full of contradictions and entanglements. Sif didn't react until a guard came to tell her that the God King had invited her. She quickly sorted out her emotions and appearance, and prepared to meet the God King Odin. "Thank you," Sif patted Weiss's shoulder, her eyes full of gratitude. "If you encounter anything in Asgard, It will definitely be helpful to report my name. Thank you in advance, Weiss said with a smile, expressing his gratitude for Sif's kindness. You're welcome, Sif instructed. Don't be timid when you meet the God King. He despises cowardice. Sif, knowing Odin's personality and preferences, hoped that Weiss would demonstrate confidence and courage, earning his approval. Weiss nodded, understanding. Asgard was enormous, its architecture magnificent. Most importantly, Weiss sensed a magical circle enveloping the entire palace. The circle emanated a powerful magical energy, creating an invisible pressure. Teams of Asgardian soldiers patrolled continuously, their postures erect and their eyes vigilant, constantly guarding the safety of Asgard. Even with a Mind Stone, breaking into Asgard wouldn't be easy. Weiss sighed inwardly. Following Sif to palace, Weiss finally met Odin, the God King and ruler of Asgard. Odin sat majestically on his throne, his figure tall and imposing, his single eye revealing boundless wisdom and power. Weiss bowed to Odin. Greetings, God King. Odin sat upright on his throne, scepter in hand. His eyes were deep and majestic, as if he could see through everything. I know you. The Ancient One once told me about you, saying you were the greatest uncertainty in the universe. Odin's voice was deep and powerful, each word imbued with boundless power. Weiss's heart stirred slightly at Odin's words. He wasn't surprised by the exchange between the two great men. After all, they were both powerful beings in the universe. Over the long years, they might even have clashed in their youth. Chapter 202 Books. You are very special. The Ancient One persuaded me to give you the Mind Stone. Odin's words echoed slowly through the palace, like a muffled thunder. Hearing these words, Weiss's heart tightened, a complex wave of emotions welling up within him. How could Odin, indeed, leave the Infinity Stones alone? Weiss pondered. He was well aware of the immense power and allure of the Infinity Stones. As the God King of Asgard, Odin couldn't possibly ignore them. The Ancient One had actually persuaded Odin to give him the Mind Stone. There must have been profound reasons and considerations behind this. I just didn't expect Thor to bring you back with a reality stone. Odin's face etched a hint of anguish. His eyes betrayed worry, troubled by this unexpected situation. Each Infinity Stone had countless eyes watching from behind. Their power was so immense that it drew the covetous attention and struggle of all factions across the universe. Now, with the 3 Infinity Stones gathered in Asgard, those who didn't know better might have thought Odin was on a heroic quest to unify the universe. However, Odin no longer harbored a love for war. He had experienced countless wars and hardships, witnessed countless lives, joys and sorrows, and grown weary of the cruelty of war. Furthermore, Odin's condition was not good. Though he tried his best to contain the raging energy within him, Weiss was keenly aware of it. The fact that a being of father status could not control his energy could only mean one thing: something was wrong with Odin's body, and it was a fatal problem. His divine power was constantly growing, and the rate of increase accelerated with age. In other words, Odin was constantly growing stronger. This sounded good, but in reality, it was not. Odin found himself losing control of his energy. This overwhelming force was like a wild horse running free, threatening to consume him at any moment. This was why he was eager to pass the throne to Thor. He knew his time was running out, and he had to make arrangements for Asgard's future as soon as possible. At this point, things were completely out of Odin's control. A solemn expression crossed his majestic face. The God King, who once ruled the 9 realms, now felt a sense of powerlessness. My purpose in seeking you out is simple. Odin stared at Weiss, his gaze penetrating his soul. Borrow the Mind Stone to retrieve the Reality Stone from within Gion. Odin's words were concise and clear, yet held an undeniable authority. If anyone else had made such a request, Weiss would have suspected they were after the Mind Stone. After all, the power of the Infinity Stones was too immense to tempt anyone. But Odin, he yearned to scatter the Infinity Stones throughout the universe to prevent the disaster and chaos they brought. Weiss, without hesitation, readily handed over the scepter. The scepter, adorned with a Mind Stone, slowly floated into Odin's hands. Odin admired Weiss's decisiveness. He nodded slightly and said, "To repay you, ask for anything." Weiss pondered for a moment, then said firmly, "Magic." That was his only request. To Weiss, magic was an endless mystery, and he longed to delve deeper and master more of it. Yes, there's a library in Asgard that contains most of the magic of the 9 realms. Odin was generous, fully aware of the value of knowledge and willing to give Weiss his due. You may make a copy of every book in there, Odin's words surprised Weiss immensely. He hadn't expected such generosity from Odin. It was undoubtedly a huge bonus for him. Afterward, a guard led Weiss to the library. The library looked unremarkable from the outside, but upon entering, Weiss was struck by the sight. Despite being a library, the space inside was incredibly vast. 12 bookshelves stood like towering trees, their volumes neatly arranged, stretching as far as the eye could see. Each volume exuded an ancient and mysterious aura, as if telling the history and stories of the 9 realms. These books were trophies of Odin's conquests of the 9 realms. They bore witness to his glory and honor, and carried the wisdom and magic of the 9 realms. However, the sheer number of books, like the vast sea of stars, was daunting. Even a cursory glance at the stacked shelves filled with books gave him a strong sense of oppression. Even just looking through the catalog would likely take a considerable amount of time. Copying so many books would undoubtedly be an incredibly arduous undertaking. The sheer volume of books instantly overwhelmed him. Weiss's brow furrowed, lost in thought. After a moment, he decisively created hundreds of clones. These clones quickly flew towards the various shelves. They scattered throughout the library, some moving between the towering shelves, while others paused over a specific book, carefully leafing through it. Weiss's focus was on magic books, those containing arcane spells, methods for drawing magic circles, and techniques for harnessing magical power held a profound fascination for him. His clones meticulously selected every magical tome, from ancient tomes to newly discovered magical manuscripts. Books on alchemy also captured Weiss's attention. Wes also copied books on potions and herbal medicine. Wes spent a whole day in the library, but even with his clones' full efforts, they hadn't copied even 10% of the books. Time slipped by in the busyness, yet it felt like only a moment. The endless ocean of books made him deeply realize the boundless nature of knowledge. Odin came to see him. The god King Odin still stood tall and majestic, but his fatigue and weakness were evident. Odin returned the scepter to Wes. With a word of keep fighting, Odin turned and left. His steps were heavy, each one requiring immense effort. Wes could see that Odin's condition had worsened. His face was pale, his eyes filled with fatigue and pain. It was probably related to using the Mind Stone. The powerful power of the Infinity Stone had intensified the energy within him. This uncontrollable force, like a raging flood, raged through his body, causing him immense pain. Just as Weiss had suspected, Odin returned to his palace and summoned Frigga and Thor to his side. A heavy atmosphere permeated the palace. Odin sat on his throne, his eyes filled with love and concern. He gave a few instructions, his voice low but powerful. Each word seemed to contain his deep love for his family and his hopes for Asgard's future. Then, Odin hastily fell into deep sleep, known as the Odin sleep. This was a way for Odin to regain his strength and stabilize his energy, but it also plunged Asgard into a state of uncertainty. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 Raid. Busy and restless, Weiss was absorbed in his pile of books, completely oblivious to the passage of time. His eyes were fixed on the volume in his hands, his entire world filled with only those mysterious texts and ancient knowledge. The library was filled with the scent of aged paper, a tranquil and peaceful atmosphere. Suddenly, a piercing alarm rang out throughout Asgard, its shrill cry instantly shattering the library's stillness. The siren pierced the air like an arrow, sending a chill through the air. Weiss jerked his head up from the pile of books, a look of surprise and confusion in his eyes. Just then, Sif rushed into the library like a whirlwind. Her face was filled with anxiety, her eyes revealing determination and courage. Sif spotted Weiss, still dazed, and without hesitation, she rushed forward, grabbing Weiss and carrying him away. The Dark Elves are invading. Get to safety. Sif's voice was quick and forceful, filled with concern for Weiss. She knew the Dark Elves' power and cruelty, and she didn't want to put him in danger. Weiss knew Sif meant well, but being held in such a way by a woman was humiliating. He exerted a slight force and pulled his hand free. I can protect myself, Weiss said with a firm and confident tone. Sif looked at him suspiciously, her heart filled with doubt. Weiss's body had undergone several enhancements, transcending the ordinary human realm. He possessed immense strength and agility, but in the eyes of the goddess, Sif, Weiss was still too weak. "I'm not a warrior, I'm a wizard," Weiss emphasized again. Sif looked at Weiss doubtfully, still filled with worry. She knew wizards possessed powerful magical powers, but she wasn't sure Weiss could protect himself against a formidable foe like the Dark Elves. As the two emerged from the library, they looked up to see a massive spaceship hovering above Asgard. The black vessel was massive and imposing, exuding a powerful, oppressive aura. Its surface gleamed with a metallic sheen, and mystical runes and patterns shimmered across it. Two escort ships flanked the mothership, like loyal guards. "That's the Dark Elf mothership," Sif said gravely. Her eyes betrayed a sense of wariness and concern. She knew the Dark Elf mothership possessed formidable firepower and defensive capabilities. Countless Dark Elf warriors leaped from the mothership, their figures descending like a black raindrop. Small craft, like locusts, densely packed the sky. They roared towards Asgard, bringing with them a breath of death and destruction. But the Asgardians were no pushovers. As the guardians of the Nine Realms, they possessed immense courage and formidable strength. Upon receiving Heimdall's warning, the Asgardian guards displayed astonishing speed and combat prowess. Armed with spears and shields, they instantly formed a defensive line like a fortress. These Asgardian guards were elite warriors who had fought Odin's conquests of the Nine Realms. They had weathered countless battles and trials, accumulating a wealth of combat experience. Despite millennia of inactivity, their warlike instincts had never waned. Instead, they were fully activated at this moment. Each Asgardian guard was capable of fighting many at once, their eyes ablaze with the fire of battle. Their spears pierced the enemy like bolts of lightning, their shields, like impenetrable walls, repelled the enemy's attacks. Their coordinated attack and defense combined to display their formidable combat prowess. Asgard's entire defense system was activated, and the towering cannon muzzles revealed their formidable strength. The massive barrels gleamed with metallic brilliance, a testament to Asgard's might. Powerful energy beams blazed from the muzzles, instantly destroying the small dark elf craft. Asgard's defenses boasted not only formidable firepower but also rigorous protective measures. An energy shield enveloped the entire Asgard, repelling the dark elf assault. Even civilians drew their weapons and charged towards the dark elves. Asgard's dominance over the Nine Realms wasn't solely due to powerful leaders like Odin and Hela. Their reputation for valor spread throughout the universe, earned with the blood and sweat of every Asgardian. The Dark Elves were firmly blocked outside Asgard, unable to break through the Asgardian defenses. Despite their vast technological and magical prowess, they were unable to advance even a single step against the Asgardians' fierce resistance. Sif and Weiss raced to a high platform. From this elevated position, they could overlook the entire battlefield. Here, Asgard's greatest forces had gathered. Thor stood at the forefront, his towering figure radiating a powerful aura, his hammer gleaming with lightning. Frigga, the Queen of Heaven, stood beside him, her gaze resolute and composed, her demeanor radiating nobility and elegance. Baldur, Hodder, Vercetti, and the others also stood in full battle formation. Their expressions were solemn, their armor gleaming metallically in the sunlight. These were Asgard's most powerful men, yet they dared not relax even a bit. They knew that Malekith, the Dark Elves' king, had not yet made his move. That figure once rivaled Odin for supremacy. His power was unfathomable, and if he attacked, he would pose a formidable threat. The Dark Elves were steadily retreating under the Asgardian warriors' encirclement. The Asgardian warriors fought valiantly, and though the Dark Elves put up a staunch resistance, they were gradually overwhelmed by the Asgardians' overwhelming force. "It's coming," Weiss whispered. His perception was acute, and at that moment, he sensed a powerful energy gathering aboard the Dark Elf mothership. That energy surged, emitting a chilling aura. Suddenly, a red beam emanated from the mothership. The beam was dazzling, its powerful energy instantly piercing the shield. The shield, vulnerable to this overwhelming force, was like fragile paper. Moreover, the beam's power showed no sign of diminishing, continuing at a breakneck speed towards the Asgardian gods. Unexpectedly, the first to strike was Frigga. Her eyes froze, and her aura suddenly shifted dramatically. In a flash of light, a suit of armor emerged from her, instantly replacing her ornate palace attire. The armor exuded a powerful aura, and every detail contained endless power. Chapter 204 Attack and Defense. It was the renowned destroyer armor. Its sleek lines, yet rigid, gave it an air of indestructibility. Mysterious runes gleamed across its surface, telling of past battles. The destroyer armor was one of Asgard's finest masterpieces. When Frigga donned this armor, she seemed transformed into a war goddess, emanating an awe-inspiring aura. Everyone, fixated on the battlefield, had inadvertently overlooked Frigga. They seemed to have forgotten that Frigga was the most powerful sorceress of the gods. Her magical prowess was unfathomable, possessing awe-inspiring power. Even Loki's treacherous and ever-changing magic was the product of her meticulous instruction. Now, driven by her immense divine power, the destroyer armor blazed with golden flames. The flames burned fiercely, as if to consume all evil. Golden light danced within the flames, emitting powerful energy fluctuations. With a whoosh, a golden beam shot out like lightning, its brilliance dazzling and its speed exceedingly fast. Golden light and the crimson energy emanating from the Dark Elf mothership collided fiercely in the air. The two powerful energies collided, unleashing astonishing force. Golden and crimson light intertwined in the air, making it difficult to determine the winner. Frigga and Thor exchanged a glance, their understanding unspoken. Thor raised his hammer, radiating the mighty force of lightning. He roared, "Asgard!" This roar seemed to declare Asgard's glory and indomitable spirit to the entire universe. With that, Thor swung his hammer, soaring like a meteor towards the Dark Elf mothership. His body was swirled with lightning, crackling and radiating a terrifying power. Any Dark Elves who approached were instantly reduced to charcoal by the powerful lightning. They didn't even have time to utter a scream before the force of the thunderbolt reduced them to ashes. Like an invincible god of war, Thor charged valiantly toward the Dark Elf mothership, determined to defend Asgard with his own might. The gods followed Thor without hesitation, clearing obstacles in his path. Each unleashed a mighty display of power, radiant and majestic. Some wielded their swords, severing the Dark Elf's craft, others unleashed powerful magic, driving the enemy back. With the gods' united strength, Thor's charge became smoother. Only Weiss and Frigga remained on the platform. Frigga's divine power was so depleted after her strike that the destroyer armor slowly fell from her. The mighty armor stood silently beside her, like a loyal bodyguard. Weiss examined the destroyer armor with curiosity, filled with wonder. If only I could study it, Weiss thought to himself. He yearned for this powerful weapon, longing to delve deeper into its construction and workings. However, he knew it was impossible. This was Odin's weapon, the fruit of Asgard's wisdom. How could an outsider like Weiss be allowed to study it? Asgard's defenses were breached, and the Dark Elves launched a fierce aerial attack. Though Asgard's firepower blanketed the sky like a vast web of fire, the Dark Elves' technology was not to be underestimated. Their aircraft nimbly weaved through the web of fire, dodging the attacks. After a fierce battle, the Dark Elves successfully destroyed several turrets. With the destruction of the turrets, a gap appeared in the web of fire. Hundreds of Dark Elves seized this opportunity, piercing the web of fire and charging through the air towards Asgard. Word magic binding. The Dark Elves suddenly found themselves trapped by a circle of light, tightening ever tighter, immobilizing them. They struggled in terror, but to no avail. Bound by the circle, they fell from their craft. Weiss used his index finger to write a rune in the air. The word glowed red, symbolizing fire. Instantly, a powerful flaming force surged from the words, sweeping toward the falling Dark Elves. The flames burned fiercely, illuminating the entire sky. "You have a great talent for magic," Frigga spoke slowly. Her voice was soft and elegant, yet carried a convincing power. Her gaze fell on Weiss, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "It's truly astonishing that you've mastered the runes so quickly. But your magic," Frigga paused, as if weighing her words. She looked at Weiss with a look of scrutiny and consideration. "While your magic possesses a certain power, your application is still somewhat immature. The power of the runes goes far beyond what you've demonstrated so far." Frigga began to instruct Weiss in the detailed use of the runes. Her words were clear and coherent, explaining complex magical principles in simple and accessible terms. Although Weiss didn't understand why she did this, he was filled with gratitude. Weiss listened intently. This opportunity was truly rare for him. To receive personal instruction from the God Queen Frigga was a rare gift. Moreover, he had the Dark Elves to experiment with, which allowed him to better understand and master the use of runes. The Dark Elves fell from the sky like dumplings, defenseless against Weiss's magical attacks. Thanks to their contribution, Weiss's use of runes became increasingly proficient. He became more adept at combining different runes, unleashing even more powerful magical power. Bang! A loud explosion echoed from the sky. Thor flew backwards from the Dark Elf mothership, his figure like a cannonball, crushing people in his path. The remaining gods also fell from the sky, their bodies covered in hideous wounds. These horrific wounds indicated that their decapitation attempt had failed. Weiss, observing this, quickly cast a levitation spell. A soft light emanated from his hand, slowing the gods' descent and preventing any secondary damage. However, judging by the gods' injuries, they would be unable to rejoin the battle. Frigga's face was grave, and she immediately ordered the medical officers to carry the gods aloft for treatment. The medical officers moved swiftly, carefully carrying the gods away. A tall, dark figure slowly descended from the mothership like a ghost. It seemed to emerge from the abyss of darkness, carrying with it a suffocating, oppressive presence. He wore black armor, its shape terrifying. Every piece seemed condensed from the power of darkness, covered in mysterious patterns and runes. Chapter 205 Spicy Shredded Chicken. In his hand, he clutched a golden spear, gleaming with dazzling light, like a streak of golden lightning. The spear's tip was impossibly sharp, emitting a piercing cold gleam that seemed capable of effortlessly piercing any obstacle. He stood there motionless, like an unshakable mountain. His black figure formed a stark contrast to the golden spear, emanating an aura of both malevolence and majesty. Beneath his helmet, a pair of icy eyes gleamed with an eerie glint that seemed to penetrate the very heart. He was Malekith, leader of the Dark Elves and ruler of the dark world of Vat-Alheim. Malekith, the enemy whom even Odin had failed to slay, now descended upon this battlefield, bringing endless terror and oppression. He slowly descended onto the rooftop, his gaze first settling on the awe-inspiring battle gear of destruction, a complex expression flashing across his eyes. Then, he turned his gaze to Frigga, his eyes filled with coldness and arrogance. "You cannot unleash its full power." Malekith's voice was low and raspy, as if emanating from the depths of hell. He seemed certain of victory, his tone brimming with confidence and arrogance. "Hand over the ether." His words were terse and direct, leaving no room for negotiation. As for Wes, he simply didn't exist, completely disregarding him. "You've learned to exploit someone's misfortune," Frigga said, unfazed. Her eyes were firm and calm, and she didn't flinch in the face of Malekith's threats. "You chose to attack Asgard while Odin was asleep. Where's your courage back then?" Frigga's words tinged with sarcasm. A flicker of anger crossed Malekith's face, and without further ado, he thrust his spear at Frigga. The golden spear, like a bolt of lightning, pierced the air, carrying a deadly threat. At this critical moment, accompanied by the sound of thunder, Thor, Mjolnir in hand, arrived just in time to deflect the spear. Wes didn't hesitate, the mind staff appearing in his hand in an instant. Dizzy, painful, weak, a string of curses erupted from his mouth, transforming into an invisible force that charged towards Malekith. However, Malekith, drawing upon Thor's power, swept his spear across, easily destroying Weiss's curses. "Be careful, his spear has a magic-breaking effect," Thor warned loudly. The weapon Malekith wielded was no ordinary weapon. The golden spear was a treasure of the Dark Elves, possessing powerful magic-breaking power and offensive power. Bird attack, a magical light flickered at Weiss's fingertips. In an instant, tens of thousands of flaming birds appeared from thin air. They flapped their wings, blazing with flames, and flew towards Malekith like a raging torrent of flame. Each bird radiated an astonishing heat, a blazing flame that could melt steel. With the appearance of the flaming birds, the temperature around them rose sharply, and the air seemed to distort with the heat. Malekith's eyes narrowed as he saw this, and he quickly drew several bombs from his body. These bombs were no ordinary weapons, they were the Dark Elves' anti-gravity weapons. Malekith flung them at the flock without hesitation. The bombs arced through the air and exploded instantly. A powerful anti-gravity force erupted, and a small black hole appeared in the sky. With its immense suction, the black hole sucked the firebirds in one by one. Under the influence of the anti-gravity weapon, the firebirds were completely unable to resist and were instantly sucked into the black hole, disappearing without a trace. Malekith dispatched the firebirds effortlessly, a scornful smile on his face, mocking the ineffectiveness of Weiss's attack. While Weiss's magic distracted Malekith, Thor seized this fleeting opportunity and rushed forward like a flash of lightning. His face was filled with rage, and he raised Mjolnir high in his hand and, with the force of a thunderbolt, brought it down upon Malekith's chest. Malekith reacted swiftly. Unfazed, he grasped Thor's wrist with one hand. His strength was immense, and with a squeeze, Thor's bones crackled. Meanwhile, black fiend fire surged behind him, a flame like a demonic flame from hell, emitting a suffocating, Terrifying aura. Malekith extended his other hand, and the fiend fire, as if summoned, quickly gathered in his palm. Wizard, you are too weak. Malekith's voice was cold and contemptuous. The invincible fiend fire was completely ineffective against Malekith, who had a natural resistance to this type of magic. Nightmare. Seeing this, Weiss unleashed his Mind Stone with a powerful mental spell. This was an extremely powerful spell that attacked the enemy's mind directly, trapping them in terrifying hallucinations. Malekith sneered and was about to say, no, but before he could finish his words, a terrifying figure suddenly appeared before him. Odin, clad in his armor of destruction, wielding the Spear of Eternity, sat atop his eight-legged steed, his entire body ablaze with lightning. His imposing figure resembled an insurmountable mountain, emanating a terrifying aura. Odin, Malekith cried out in terror, involuntarily taking 2 steps back. In the moment he lost consciousness, Thor's hammer struck his chest hard. The immense force shook his body, and black blood spurted from his mouth. The blow also shattered his illusion, his eyes filled with anger and resentment. Weiss was barely a fraction of his age. Malekith had endured countless battles and hardships over his long years, witnessing all manner of powerful forces and magic. He could never believe that someone so young before him could possess such profound magical proficiency. His gaze fixed on the scepter in Weiss's hand, particularly the blue gem, which shone with a deep, captivating light. The faint fluctuations of energy within the gem stirred Malekith's heart. Ha ha ha! Malekith roared with excitement. The laughter echoed in the air, filled with madness and greed. The Mind Stone, he recognized the gem instantly. The Mind Stone, one of the most powerful gems in the universe, possessed a mysterious power to control the mind. He had heard legends of the Mind Stone countless times, but had never had the opportunity to see it in person. Now, the gem appeared before his eyes. How could he not be excited? He stood up from the ground and calmly dusted himself off. Chapter 206, The Eternal Spear. He stared silently at Weiss, his eyes filled with desire and menace. It seemed to penetrate everything, sending chills down one's spine. Wizard, hand over the Mind Stone. His voice was low and cold, like a chill wind from hell, carrying an undeniable authority. He knew that if he could obtain the Mind Stone, his power would be greatly enhanced. With the ether and the Mind Stone, dominating the universe was no longer a dream. The Dark Elves had longed to plunge the universe into eternal darkness, longing to rule in darkness. Now, taking advantage of this unique opportunity, with the 9 realms connected, they saw an opportunity to realize their dream. With these 2 Infinity Stones, they would have enough power to change the fate of the entire universe. Weiss, of course, would not hand over the Mind Stone. Golden puppet soldiers surrounded him like an impenetrable wall. Puppet magic army, Weiss shouted, his hands dancing. In an instant, the puppet soldiers, spears in hand, rushed towards Malekith like a tide. Malekith showed no fear. He swept his spear, unleashing a powerful force that sent dozens of puppets flying. They tumbled through the air before tumbling heavily to the ground. Those things dare to hit me, Malekith sneered. The puppets surged toward Malekith like a tide, an endless stream. Malekith trod against a current, his steps firm and powerful. The puppet army proved no match for him. Like an invincible god of war, he bravely advanced through the sea of puppets. But what he failed to notice was that the puppets were slowly transforming into wooden figures. The figures grew in number, weaponless, simply charging towards Malekith. Like ants finding food, they recklessly rushed forward. The falling puppets beneath Malekith's feet nearly reached his knees. It's no use. What can such weak puppets do? He scoffed. However, his response was met by countless puppets pounced upon him, obscuring his vision. The puppets piled up, surrounding him tightly. Soon, he was completely buried within them. Arda's explosion. Weiss raised his hands. His voice echoed through the air, filled with strength and determination. Instantly, all the puppets exploded. Boom! With a resounding roar, a mushroom cloud rose into the air. The explosion was devastating, and the shockwaves sent the surrounding Asgardian warriors careening to the ground, dizzy from the overwhelming force. The blast captivated everyone's attention. From the gods of Asgard to the Dark Elves, they were stunned by the colossal explosion. They paused their battles and gazed towards the epicenter. There, a cloud of smoke and dust obscured the view. Everyone wondered what Malekith's fate would be, wondering if he had survived the blast. "What are you standing there for?" Weiss shouted anxiously. He could clearly sense that Malekith was still alive, his vitality undiminished. This made Wes's heart tighten, knowing he couldn't give Malekith any breathing space. Thor, without hesitation, flew towards the center of the explosion like a flash of lightning. His gaze was resolute, his heart filled with a single conviction: to defeat Malekith and defend Asgard. A flash of gold gradually appeared within Thor's sight. Dang! The two artifacts clashed violently, creating a deafening sound. The powerful shockwave instantly dispersed the surrounding smoke and dust, and Malekith emerged unscathed before everyone. However, his armor was now tattered, making him look rather disheveled. "Get out of the way!" Malekith glared at Wes with a murderous glare. Thor roared, his arms' muscles instantly swelled to their full strength, his face contorted with a force. The ground beneath his feet cracked under the immense force, cracks spreading like a spider web. Thor felt his end was imminent, but he couldn't retreat. Strength, rapid recovery, agility, great strength. Wes rapidly cast various buff spells, sending beams of light descending upon Thor. Empowered by these buffs, Thor gradually overpowered Malekith. His strength grew, and the lightning from Thor's hammer intensified. Wes teleported to Malekith's side, poised to deliver the fatal blow. "Shadow entanglement," Wes muttered, and his shadow instantly lengthened, connecting with Malekith's. He attempted to control Malekith's body, immobilizing him. However, Malekith was not so easily controlled. He struggled, his immense power straining Wes. Sweat streamed down Wes's forehead, and he gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain control. Thor also increased his power, his eyes blazing with lightning. The light was as blinding as lightning, too blinding to look directly at. Malekith saw in him a reflection of Odin's youth. These two must die. Malekith made a secret resolution: he couldn't let these two men stand in his way. A stalemate remained between the three of them, neither able to gain the upper hand. However, there was another figure on the battlefield: Frigga. Frigga extended her right hand, and a beam of golden light shot out from Odin's palace. It was Odin's trump card, the Eternal Spear. Frigga poured her divine power into the Eternal Spear. Initially, the spear resisted, unwilling to receive Frigga's power. But Frigga persisted, chanting an incantation, her voice soft yet firm. Gradually, the Eternal Spear calmed and began to absorb Frigga's divine power. After absorbing the power, the Eternal Spear transformed into a meteor, shooting towards Malekith at an incredible speed. The speed was so swift that it was impossible to react, as if time had stood still. Malekith's heart began to beat violently, the intense rhythm playing a thrilling war song within his chest. He clearly felt the Eternal Spear's unique and powerful aura, overwhelming him like a surging tide. He knew the Eternal Spear's power all too well. He had fought Odin countless times and knew its terrifying might. "I must dodge this blow," Malekith screamed frantically in his heart, every cell in his body tensing at that moment. He knew that if this blow hit him, he would likely suffer severe damage, perhaps even lose his life. Chapter 207: The End. But how could Wes and Thor let Malekith slip away so easily? They knew this opportunity was so rare, forged through arduous battle, that they couldn't let it go to waste. Thor's eyes gleamed with determination as he swiftly extended his left hand, firmly grasping Malekith's wrist. "Don't try to escape," Thor roared, his voice resonating like thunder. His right hand gripped Mjolnir tightly, pressing down, transmitting immense force through it to Malekith's arms. Thor exerted all his might to control Malekith's arms, denying him even the slightest chance of escape. Meanwhile, Wes sprang into action. He used shadow magic, channeling his own magical energy into the shadows. As if imbued with life, the shadows expanded rapidly, tightly encircling Malekith's body and preventing him from moving. Beads of sweat formed on Wes's forehead as he concentrated intensely on maintaining the power of his magic, not daring to let up even for a moment. Just as the Eternal Spear was about to pierce Malekith, in the nick of time, Malekith disintegrated into a cloud of black mist. The mist instantly expanded, obscuring the view within. The Eternal Spear pierced the mist, continuing forward with immense force, on the verge of impaling Thor. In that critical moment, Thor felt a hand on his body. The next moment, he appeared outside Asgard. It was Weiss who had teleported to Thor's side in a fraction of a second, then teleported again to carry him to safety. Without a sound, most of Asgard was silently reduced to dust. The once magnificent buildings crumbled in an instant under the Eternal Spear's residual force, reduced to fine dust. A gentle breeze blew the dust away, dispersing it completely into the air, as if it had never existed. "Mother! Father!" Thor roared, his voice filled with anxiety and worry. His heart was filled with fear, fearing that his loved ones would be harmed in this catastrophe. He rushed desperately towards Odin's palace, his steps hurried and frantic. But his fears were clearly overblown. How could the eternal spear harm its owner? Odin's palace remained intact, still standing, exuding a majestic aura. Frigga, unscathed, stood quietly before the palace, her eyes filled with determination and composure. "Mother," Thor asked worriedly, "are you safe?" Frigga shook her head gently, saying gently, "I'm fine." Putting that aside, Malekith is not dead yet. Her gaze fixed intently ahead, she saw wisps of black energy slowly coalescing. As if alive, the black energy wriggled and gradually condensed into Malekith's body. However, his current condition was far from perfect, utterly deplorable. He had spent millennia developing the technique to evade the Eternal Spear's transformation into black mist. However, the cost of this technique was so high that even he could only use it once. Light magic illuminates. Weiss cast his spell again, and countless light bullets suddenly appeared in the sky. They fell from the sky like meteors, trailing long tails and emitting dazzling light. However, these light bullets had a clear target, Malekith. The light bullets rained down like a torrential rain, illuminating the entire battlefield. Each light bullet was imbued with powerful magical energy. Malekith brandished his spear, desperately blocking the light bullets. His movements were swift and powerful, and his spear swung through the air in brilliant streaks of light, sending the light bullets flying one by one. However, the number of light bullets was too great, and he gradually became overwhelmed. Some of the light bullets pierced the palace, leaving deep holes in the walls and floor. Ice magic beasts. Weiss did not pause, and immediately cast another powerful spell. In an instant, ice beasts condensed from the air. The icy beasts took on various forms, some resembling lions, some tigers, and some wolves. They all growled lowly at Malekith. A biting chill emanated from the icy beasts, as if it could freeze everything. With heavy steps, they slowly approached Malekith. Weiss then continued to cast ranged spells, attempting to wear down Malekith's strength. His hands danced, magical glints flickering from his fingertips. Powerful spells flew from his hands, soaring towards Malekith. Magic from various elements, fire, lightning, and wind, intertwined to form a dazzling yet dangerous storm. Malekith struggled to withstand this storm, the surging magical force crashing against him like a tidal wave. He swung his spear with impenetrable force, attempting to deflect the onslaught of magic one by one. However, each resistance consumed his strength, his breathing becoming heavier, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. While fending off the magic, Malekith constantly sought opportunities to close the distance between him and Weiss. "Thor, come help," Weiss shouted urgently. Thor, hearing the cry, rushed over and stopped Malekith. The two instantly engaged in a fierce, close combat. Every movement was imbued with power and murderous intent, each strike aimed at the opponent's vital points. Thor swung Mjolnir, striking Malekith with thunderous force. Malekith nimbly parried Thor's blows with his spear, searching for weaknesses to counterattack. The battle intensified, and Malekith gradually fell behind. His strength had been greatly depleted from fending off the magic, while Thor, relying on his superior physique and the power of Mjolnir, gradually gained the upper hand. Malekith's movements began to slow, and a hint of anxiety and fatigue appeared in his eyes. But he did not give up, still stubbornly resisting Thor's attacks, looking for a chance to turn the tide. Weiss was also busy, knowing full well that the key to this battle lay in delivering a fatal blow to Malekith. He concentrated intently, preparing a powerful gift for Malekith. As Thor and Malekith wrestled once again, the air thick with tension. Their powers collided, creating a dull thud. At this crucial moment, Weiss unleashed his magic. Chapter 208 End. Malekith was forced back repeatedly by Thor's overwhelming force, his steps stumbling and his body unsteady. Finally, he slammed heavily into a solid wall, coming to a stop. The wall trembled slightly at the impact. "Get out of the way," Malekith shouted, his eyes filled with resentment and anger. However, Weiss had already activated the magic he had prepared long ago. Gudong, the ground beneath Malekith began to boil violently, like a massive volcano about to erupt. The ground trembled continuously, and a powerful force seemed to be about to burst forth. Thor, observing this, immediately retreated from the dangerous area. Malekith's golden spear pierced the ground like lightning, trying to break Weiss's magic. However, he soon realized it was too late. Weiss had prepared this magic for a long time. In an instant, magma erupted from the ground, carrying a scorching heat and a powerful impact, hitting Malekith firmly. The boiling magma, like flames from hell, instantly engulfed Malekith. Malekith struggled painfully within the lava, unable to escape the overwhelming force. Lava erupted hundreds of meters into the air, exploding in a dazzling display like fireworks. However, this beautiful spectacle concealed a formidable danger. Malekith knelt on one knee, his body severely burned, his skin charred black and emitting a pungent odor. The remaining lava continued to sear him, causing him excruciating pain. His eyes were filled with pain and despair, yet also with a hint of stubbornness and unyielding determination. However, Thor would not give him another chance. With a powerful kick of his legs, Thor leaped into the air, his hammer held high. As he moved, dark clouds gathered in the sky, as if gathered by an invisible hand. Lightning flashed and thunder roared continuously, and streaks of lightning slithered through the clouds like silver snakes. Mjolnir, like a powerful magnetic field, madly absorbed the force of the lightning. The gleaming light from its hilt grew ever more dazzling, making it difficult to gaze directly upon it. Thor concentrated all his divine power upon Mjolnir. His eyes were firm and resolute, his heart filled with a single conviction, to bring this battle to a decisive end. Then, like a meteor, Thor descended from the sky, his hammer slamming down upon Malekith's head with devastating force. In that instant, time seemed to stand still. With a resounding bang, Malekith exploded like a watermelon. His body fell limply to the ground, motionless. Thor raised his right hand and shouted, "Asgard!" His voice echoed through the air, filled with majesty and pride. Asgard, the roar of all Asgardians, like waves crashing through the ocean, shook the very earth. Their faces beamed with the joy and pride of victory, fighting for their home and their glory. The Dark Elves, seeing their king slain, were instantly terrified. They sought to flee Asgard, seeking a new life. However, the Asgardians would not let them go. Asgardian artillery fire roared, streaks of fire streaking through the sky, piercing the Dark Elves' aircraft. The aircraft exploded under the barrage, raining down debris. The battle was fierce, the Asgardians relentlessly pursuing the Dark Elves, leaving them no chance of escape. The battle finally ended when no more Dark Elf aircraft could be seen in the sky. Weiss slowly approached Malekith's body, a daring thought suddenly forming within him. If we could create a puppet of him, he would be a formidable aid. Weiss's greed quietly rose in that moment. Frigga keenly sensed Weiss's thoughts. "We will take care of Malekith's body," her voice gentle, yet with undeniable determination. Weiss frowned slightly. He had indeed contributed to this battle, and a sense of resentment was inevitable. "His weapon is yours," Frigga said, seeming to sense Weiss's displeasure. She handed him the golden spear. Weiss reached out to take the spear and instantly felt a heavy pressure. "It's so heavy," this was Weiss's first feeling. With his current physical condition, he wouldn't feel anything even if you held hundreds of pounds, but this spear made him feel an unprecedented weight. It's worthy of being a divine weapon capable of standing head-on with Mjolnir. Weiss didn't know the exact material of the golden spear, but he was certain it was the finest material in the universe. With this artifact, Weiss no longer worried about Malekith's body. Frigga personally buried Malekith's body. Although Malekith was an enemy, Frigga still accorded him a final respect. In her opinion, even enemies deserved proper dignity in death. The sudden war had come to an end, but its aftermath was far from over. Thor ordered his men to clean up the battlefield. Asgard had suffered heavy losses in the surprise attack. Casualties were heavy, and many brave warriors had been separated from their families and friends forever. Houses and palaces were destroyed in the battle, leaving the once magnificent Asgard in ruins. However, the most serious problem was Odin's absence. Everyone suspected that he was ill, casting a shadow of uncertainty over Asgard's future. Ambitious individuals in the Nine Realms were already stirring, and Asgard faced a turbulent Nine Realms. However, all of this was a matter for later consideration. That evening, Asgard held a grand ceremony. It was both a memorial for their fallen comrades and a celebration of victory. Asgardians were not prone to sentimentality, dying in battle was an honor. During the ceremony, they raised their glasses in the highest respect for the warriors who had fallen so bravely. Flames burned in the night sky, illuminating every face. Their eyes were filled with determination and courage, as if to tell the world that Asgard would never be defeated. As everyone celebrated, Weiss was immersed in the joy of victory, his face beaming with a brilliant smile. He raised his glass with the Asgardians around him, cheering for this hard-earned victory. However, just then, Frigga quietly approached Weiss. Her eyes held a hint of mystery as she gently patted Weiss's shoulder. Weiss was momentarily startled, but before he could react, Frigga gestured for him to follow her out of the banquet. Chapter 209 Farewell. The sounds of laughter and the clinking of glasses blended into a joyful symphony. But Weiss was filled with confusion. He couldn't understand why Frigga had taken him away at this moment. They walked along a quiet corridor, their footsteps echoing through the empty palace. Ancient scrolls lined the walls, recounting Asgard's glorious history. Weiss's gaze was drawn to the paintings, but his mind was constantly pondering Frigga's actions. Finally, they arrived at Odin's palace. This magnificent palace exuded a majestic aura, its towering pillars seemingly supporting the sky. Weiss looked around, his doubts growing stronger. Just as he was about to ask, Frigga lowered her head slightly, her expression solemn, and slowly withdrew a hexagonal box. The box looked exquisite, every edge polished to an impeccable finish. Mysterious runes were engraved on the surface, those ancient symbols like pulsing musical notes. Weiss's eyes were instantly drawn to the box. Curiosity filled his heart, wondering what secrets lay within. A powerful weapon? Or a mysterious magical item? Frigga softly chanted a spell, its words echoing through the air like a melodious melody. As the spell rang out, the mechanisms on the box opened layer by layer, making gentle clicks. Each layer was like peeling back a veil of mystery, making one's heart beat faster. When the final layer opened, the dazzling reality stone was revealed. The stone shone brilliantly. Weiss was captivated by the reality stone. Even though he already possessed the mind stone, its allure still captivated him. Frigga gently closed the box, her movements cautious. Weiss's face was filled with confusion, not understanding what she meant. Odin said that when multiple infinity stones converge, something bad will happen. Now, 3 of them have converged in Asgard. Frigga's voice was soft but serious, her eyes revealing deep concern. Are you trying to get me out? Wes frowned slightly, feeling a little uncomfortable. Of course not. Thanks to you, Thor was able to kill Malekith, Frigga quickly explained, her eyes filled with gratitude. But, Wes knew there would be a twist. He stared at Frigga, awaiting her next words. We resisted the Dark Elves' attack this time, but we can't stop every ambitious individual in the universe. Wes was silent for a moment, then understood Frigga's concerns. Frigga worried that the 3 Infinity Stones would attract Thanos' forces, but she was too embarrassed to ask him to leave. I understand. I'll leave as soon as possible. Wes took a deep breath. Frigga handed the box to Wes. Odin wanted to give the reality stone to the collector for safekeeping, but you're a good choice. I'll give it to you. Wes was stunned. The reality stone was just handed to him like that. For Asgard, the Infinity Stones were nothing more than a burden. Their most important priority now was maintaining stability in the 9 realms. Weiss thought to himself that Frigga was simply passing the buck. But Weiss was willing to take the blame, knowing the gem's power. Weiss took the hexagonal box, feeling the slight coolness of the air. Frigga instructed Weiss on the spell and warned, your current strength doesn't allow you to directly manipulate the reality stone. You need to control it with tools like the scepter. Frigga's eyes were filled with concern, as if she felt a little embarrassed to pass such a heavy burden on Weiss. Then, Frigga opened Odin's vault and let him choose. It was undeniable that many of the treasures in Odin's vault made Weiss salivate. They exuded a powerful aura, each a legendary weapon. However, Weiss already had 2 Infinity Stones and the Golden Spear, so he wouldn't need anything else. Weiss then asked for some materials, and Frigga readily agreed. Various metals, herbs, and seeds not found on Earth. Weiss stored them all in the briefcase. He wanted to build his own world, and all these things were essential. Thor's face was filled with joy, his powerful arms tightly wrapped around Jane, as they sang and danced joyfully among the crowd. His tall figure swayed to the rhythm of the music, his long golden hair flowing in the wind. Jane, moved by Thor's enthusiasm, her face blossomed with a smile as bright as a flower, her beautiful eyes sparkling with joy. Her hands rested gently on Thor's shoulders, and they reveled in this joyful moment together. They felt like the center of the world, their joy bringing everything around them to life. Meanwhile, Sif, watching Thor and Jane so intimately, felt an indescribable surge of anger and jealousy. She gripped her wine glass tightly, the delicate glass threatening to shatter in her grasp. Seeing Sif's reaction, the others began to urge her to duel with Jane. Their faces wore playful smiles, their eyes gleaming with excitement. Some shouted, Sif, show us your strength and show her who is truly worthy of Thor. They seemed to anticipate a spectacular duel, as if it would add even more passion and excitement to the bustling revelry. The revelry outside lasted all night. Music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses blended into a unique symphony. The air was filled with a rich aroma of wine, its rich aroma lingering intoxicatingly. The ground was littered with people, some passed out in corners, others huddled together. Thor carried Jane high into the air, and they, braving the breeze, gazed down at the magnificent scene below. The golden sunlight bathed them, as if shrouding them in a divine aura. "Beautiful," Jane exclaimed, her eyes filled with wonder and joy. She gazed toward the distant horizon, where the sun was slowly rising, painting the sky a vibrant riot of color. Thor looked at Jane, her beauty captivating him. His eyes were filled with tenderness and love. Slowly, he leaned in, about to kiss Jane. Ahem, a slightly awkward cough interrupted the impending romance. They both turned away awkwardly, a blush spreading across Jane's face, and Thor scratched his head sheepishly. "Did I bother you?" a voice called out. Thor and Jane turned to see Wes with a faint smile on his face. "Hi, Wes," Thor said, trying to change the subject, his voice a touch strained. "Are you here to enjoy the sunrise, too?" "I'm here to say goodbye," Wes said calmly. "Why are you so anxious?" Thor frowned slightly, a trace of regret on his face. Wes simply shook his head and said, "I have things to attend to and need to leave quickly." He didn't elaborate. "You're always welcome in Asgard," Thor said solemnly. His eyes were filled with sincerity and gratitude for Wes's immense assistance in this battle. The gates of Asgard are always open to Weiss. Whenever and wherever Weiss needs it, they will lend a helping hand without hesitation. Weiss nodded, and he felt Thor's sincerity. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Bugs. Weiss's figure quietly emerged from a pitch-black space. All around him was pure darkness, devoid of a single ray of light, as if the entire world had been swallowed by an endless darkness. The silence was eerie, devoid of any sound, only Weiss's gentle breathing echoing through the air. Strange, where's this place? Is this place so strange this time? Weiss wondered. He had never encountered such a situation before. While his previous journeys had presented various unknowns, nothing was as baffling as this one. This seems to be a separate dimension, Weiss pondered silently. He began to survey his surroundings, his eyes straining to adjust to the extreme dimness. He searched for some clue, some sign of where he was. However, he found nothing but endless darkness. The urge to break free from this dimension rose within Weiss. Just then, heavy breathing echoed from behind him. Weiss spun around, only to be confronted by a knight radiating an ominous aura. The knight was clad in black armor, his eyes flickering eerily beneath his helmet. He exuded a chilling aura, like a demon from hell. He had apparently lost his mind, and upon seeing Weiss, he attacked. Roar! The knight roared deafeningly, brandishing his longsword as he charged at Weiss. Weiss's mood suddenly soured. He had been transported to an unknown place and attacked. "Since you initiated the attack, don't blame me," Weiss said, a surge of rage welling up in his heart. A few minutes later, the furious knight, under Weiss's attack, dissipated into tiny specks of light. "This thing isn't human, it's some kind of energy aggregate," Weiss frowned, pondering the nature of this strange being. As he pondered, a chant echoed through the space. A magic circle slowly appeared, emitting a mysterious light. A teleportation circle. Is this a way to leave here? Is it a trap? Weiss was filled with doubt. He eyed the magic circle warily, debating whether to enter. However, he quickly realized that his control panel wouldn't teleport him to a dangerous place for no reason. After some thought, Weiss finally decided to step into the teleportation circle. "The magic circle is responding," a voice exclaimed, eager and excited. "Hurry up and sign the contract, you piece of shit," the disgusting old man roared, his face a ferocious expression, his eyes revealing greed and madness. A series of incomprehensible incantations emanated from the old man's mouth, as if urging him to do something. Weiss opened his eyes and saw three people before him. The old man's face was wrinkled, his skin sagging, and he exuded a nauseating smell of decay. A malnourished middle-aged man, thin and pale, his eyes revealing confusion and anxiety. Another, A no-name lolly, stood there silently, expressionless. Why does this scene sound so familiar? Weiss muttered to himself, a sense of déjà vu washing over him. He asked directly, "Where's this place?" The old man frowned, a hint of confusion flashing in his eyes. "What's going on? You don't know about the Holy Grail?" Holy Grail, those two words instantly told Weiss what world he had arrived in. His gaze fell on the control panel, and he saw that the world column had also changed to Fate Zero. So this is here. That means that dark space just now is Chaldea. Weiss fell into deep thought, pondering her strategy for this world. There's something wrong with this heroic spirit. Matau Korea, use the command seals quickly. The experienced Matau Zalkin noticed Weiss's abnormality and immediately ordered. But Matau Korea hesitated. Do I really want to waste a command seal right at the start? Hesitation crossed his face, his heart filled with conflict. The command seals were extremely precious to him, and he didn't want to waste them easily. Asshole! At this time, Matau Zalkin was furious and was about to continue his scolding. No talking here, Weiss cast a spell. In an instant, the Matau father and son found themselves unable to utter a single word. Their mouths gaped, but no sound emanated, terror written across their faces. Zalkin Matau attacked, shooting a stream of dark blue flame at Weiss. The flames were like venomous snakes. Weiss teleported behind him. 10 times gravity, he whispered. Zalkin Matau collapsed to the ground, his body as if crushed by a mountain. Even moving a finger became extremely difficult. But in that instant, Zalkin Matau's body transformed into countless disgusting insects crawling everywhere. Weiss frowned, a flicker of disgust in his eyes. Without hesitation, he unleashed Fiend Fire, incinerating the disgusting insects. It seems Malekith is just too strong. Fiend Fire is still effective, Weiss thought to himself. He's dead. Korea Matau gazed at the ashes, overjoyed. He felt no sadness at the death of his supposed father, he was even happy. His heart was filled with hatred for Zalkin Matau, the evil old man who had brought him endless suffering. Weiss knew the old man wouldn't die so easily. Wand in hand, he cast a barrier. The entire Matau residence, both above and below ground, was enveloped in a barrier. Just in case, Weiss continued his word spirit magic. No entry or exit, unless someone with far greater magical power than Weiss, or simply killed him, there was no way to break the barrier. After doing so, Weiss knocked on the floorboards and found nothing underneath. Just as he was about to blast the floorboards apart, a rustling sound erupted from the ground. Countless insects burst through the floorboards like a fountain, emerging from the ground. Weiss's face was filled with disgust. The insects were endless, filling the basement in seconds. Weiss cast a levitation spell, and the mysterious magic, like a gentle breeze, slowly lifted the three of them, keeping them floating steadily in the air. By then, the entire basement was filled with an endless stream of insects, surging like a surging tide, a terrifying sight. The insects began to rapidly form themselves. Gradually, a face of Zalkin Matau, composed of insects, appeared before everyone. The scene was extremely eerie, each insect slightly wriggling, as if speaking an evil word. Although Zalkin Matau could not speak at this moment, his will drove the insects to form a sentence. The words formed by the insects were crooked, but they clearly conveyed his intention. Stop, I can help you win the Holy Grail War. Chapter 211 The Holy Grail. Weiss ignored Zalkin Matau's bewitching words. His eyes were firm and cold, like two sharp swords, piercing the evil face composed of insects. He felt only disgust and wariness for this evil old man, and would never be fooled by his sweet talk. Phoenix, Weiss shouted softly. Instantly, golden flames appeared from thin air, radiating an incomparable heat like brilliant gold. Each flame was like a miniature sun, its light so dazzling that it was hard to look directly at. Under the intense heat, the wooden room began to spontaneously combust. The once sturdy planks and beams quickly burst into flames. Black smoke billowed from the burning area. The golden flames continued to converge, like countless golden rivers converging into a sea. Gradually, they merged into a massive fireball, emitting suffocating heat and powerful energy. A pair of brilliant wings spread within the fireball, and a golden phoenix let out a resounding cry. Weiss led the other two, enveloped in the golden phoenix's light, and slowly flew out of the Matau residence. Like the sun falling to the earth, a massive fireball engulfed the house. The fireball's power was immense, instantly transforming the entire house into a sea of inferno. The intense heat distorted the very air, as if the entire world had become illusory under the scorching heat. Weiss had deployed a protective shield, tightly enveloping the three of them. Unaffected within the shield, they watched the spectacular yet terrifying scene unfold before them, unharmed. The surrounding area, hundreds of meters in radius, was also affected. The blazing flames and powerful impact reduced everything to ash. Fortunately, the Matau residence was remote and uninhabited, so no one was injured. The entire house vanished without a trace, not even ash left. In its place, only a deep pit remained, with a red liquid flowing in it, like magma, emitting a scorching heat. The heat and flames destroyed everything, leaving no trace. Under such circumstances, no one could survive such a horrific scene. A magician who had lived for 500 years always had a trick up his sleeve. Weiss knew this well, and he used his magical detection to search the surrounding space. However, he found no other life forms. Still uneasy, he drew his scepter. The mind gem gleamed. That old thing is still alive, Weiss thought to himself. However, no matter how well Zauken Matau hid, he couldn't completely close his mind. I found you, Weiss's eyes flashed with a sharp light. In the scorched earth, a black insect hid in the mud, enduring the heat. It remained motionless, biding its time. Damn it, this thing isn't a heroic spirit. Zauken Matau's mind raced, filled with fear and unease. Something's wrong with this Holy Grail war. His thoughts raced, trying to find a way out. With a soft squeak, Weiss pierced Zauken Matau with his golden spear. The spear's powerful magic-breaking power instantly negated all his backup plans. Matau Zauken left this world without even a last word. His life, in the face of such overwhelming force, seemed so fragile. Weiss gazed upon the impaled insect, his eyes devoid of pity. The spear lightly sliced through the air, and a crack appeared instantly. A faint light flickered at the edge, and a strange glow emanated from another dimension. Weiss leaned slightly to signal Matau Korea and Matau Sakura to follow. Matau Korea gazed upon the ash-reduced Matau residence, his eyes devoid of any nostalgia. Once, that place had been a prison of pain and torment for him, its every corner laden with unbearable memories. The gloomy building, the dark basement, and the evil Matau Zauken had plunged him into endless fear and despair. Now, seeing it completely destroyed in the raging flames, reduced to ruins, he felt a sense of relief. A heavy weight lifted from his heart, and an unprecedented sense of relief washed over him. He's not a bad guy. He protected Sakura and me during the battle, Matau Korea thought silently, overflowing with gratitude towards Weiss. Matau Korea, always timid, didn't hesitate at this moment. He held Sakura's small hand tightly, as if holding up a safe haven for her. Sakura's eyes held a hint of confusion and unease, but seeing Matau Korea's resolute expression, she followed him closely. Together, they headed towards the mysterious rift. Once they entered, the rift quietly vanished, as if it had never appeared. Matau Korea surveyed this space with curiosity. Everything here seemed strange and mysterious. Is this some kind of teleportation magic? But there's no moon, no stars, and no wind. Matau Korea had no natural talent for magic, but he had been exposed to magical knowledge since childhood. He pondered. Is this a space he created himself? The thought flashed through his mind, making him even more awed by Weiss's strength. Weiss snapped her fingers, and Jandy appeared instantly. Quickly, Jandy set about setting the scene. Soon, a table, several chairs, and 3 fragrant drinks appeared. She even provided a child's seat for Matau Sakura, a thoughtful gesture. Please sit down. I have many questions, Weiss said in a calm and gentle voice. Matau Korea sat nervously in his chair, his body slightly stiff. Is this the 4th Holy Grail War? Weiss asked. Yes, Matau Korea answered honestly, without a trace of concealment. Weiss was a powerful and mysterious being, and he dared not lie. Are you from the Matau clan? Yes, Matau Korea answered Weiss's questions honestly, without holding back. However, he knew less than Weiss did. At least Weiss knew the identities of all the masters and heroic spirits. The Holy Grail can access the very source of magic. Weiss fell into deep thought, debating whether or not to participate in the quest for the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail should be tainted by now, but I have the Infinity Stones, mind and reality. Perhaps I can purify it, this thought kept swirling in his mind. Finally, Weiss decided to join the fight for the Holy Grail. The only way to find out if he could purify the Holy Grail was to first obtain it. Chapter 212 New Discovery. The heroic spirit you summoned as a berserker, Weiss looked at Matau. Yes, Matau replied. In front of Weiss, he felt like a transparent person, without any secrets. A feeling of powerlessness welled up in him, yet he felt helpless. Every word that uttered from his lips was filled with a helpless resignation, completely overwhelmed by Weiss's aura. Then, from today on, you are my master, Weiss said flatly. The voice was not loud, but it exploded like thunder in Matau's ears. What? Matau was shocked and stood up suddenly. His movements were flustered and hurried, like a suddenly startled rabbit. In the moment of rising, he knocked over the chair. But you are not a servant. Doing this is against the rules. His voice was filled with shock and confusion. Every syllable trembled, revealing his extreme anxiety. His eyes were wide, full of disbelief at what he had just heard. Who knows? Weiss pointed at his arm. Look, the command seals on your hand haven't disappeared, which means you're still the master. Weiss's voice remained calm, her fingers long and powerful. So where's the real berserker? Matau asked eagerly, his voice thick with anxiety and unease. From now on, I'm the berserker. Weiss's response made Matau choke. This guy is clearly a magician. How could he possibly be pretending to be a berserker? Matau muttered to himself, but he didn't dare to retort. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He didn't know why Weiss was doing this, nor did he know how to respond. Are you joining the Holy Grail War because of this child? Weiss turned her gaze to Matau. Matau tugged at the hem of Matau's clothes, her small body appearing so fragile and helpless. Her eyes were empty and lifeless, as if she had lost her soul. Her movements were gentle, as if she feared disturbing something. Matau caressed Matau's head tenderly, his gesture gentle and loving. Matau's eyes were glassy as she clung to him, his only support. I can solve this child's problem. Weiss's voice broke the silence. Really? Matau, grasping at a last straw, his voice filled with surprise and hope. He knelt on the ground. Please save this child. His eyes were filled with pleading. Your problem is greater than this child's. Weiss examined Matau's body. Your body is like an hourglass, your vitality constantly draining away. At this rate, you'll be dead in less than 2 months. Weiss's voice was tinged with regret. 2 more months? Matau was overjoyed, his voice filled with surprise and delight. That's enough for me to kill Tokemi. His eyes gleamed with a mad glint. This guy is truly a sentimental man. Weiss sighed, inwardly sighing. How could a disabled person like you possibly kill a magus? Weiss's words were tinged with doubt. The crest worm gnawed at Matau's flesh and blood, merging into his nerves. After a year of torture, Matau's left side was nearly paralyzed, leaving him with barely any movement left in his left leg or arm. His left eye's vision completely vanished, and the muscles around it were completely paralyzed. In just 3 months, his hair turned completely white, his skin lost all its color, becoming a ghostly earthy gray. His face was utterly disfigured. I'm no longer the same, Matau said, sensing the magical energy within him. I've learned magic, and my body possesses magical powers. His voice was filled with confidence and determination. That's just your illusion. Weiss punctured his illusion. The crest bugs are absorbing your life force and converting it into magical power. Every time you use magic, you drain your life force. Weiss's voice was cold and unfeeling. It's all the same. Only if Tasuka Tokemi is killed will Aoi, Matau and Rin be happy. Everything is that guy's fault. Matau was now like a demon, his eyes filled with hatred and rage. The only person I can't forgive is Tasuka Tokemi. His voice was filled with determination. Is this love, and the power of jealousy? Weiss pondered to himself. The mind gem, like smelling something delicious, absorbed the jealousy and love within Matau. Does the mind gem have this ability? Weiss realized he hadn't fully explored the mind gem. Not only can it control people's minds, it also has the power to absorb emotions. Weiss felt a surge of excitement, seeing a whole new realm waiting for him to explore. However, the power of a single person's emotions was too limited to satisfy the mind gem's appetite. This is very interesting, worth further research. There aren't many people as simple, emotionally rich, and openly expressive as Matau. It's a pity to die like this. Weiss tossed Matau a potion. What is this? Matau asked, puzzled. Something that increases your vitality. The side effect is nightmares, Weiss explained. Matau downed the entire potion without hesitation. He could feel his tattered body beginning to heal, and the numbness in his vision and left side of his body was gone. Beside him, Sakura Matau hugged him. Uncle Yanai, uncle. Her voice was emotionless, her face expressionless, like a robot. But Matau Korea felt a warmth. Ying, you finally spoke. You will definitely get better. Matau Korea's voice was filled with excitement and joy, and the trembling tone seemed to express his deepest hope. His eyes were full of love and tenderness. His hands gently stroked Sakura Matau's hair. This child is worried about you, really? Matau Korea's voice was tinged with confusion and surprise. He slowly lowered his head and looked at Sakura Matau in his arms. The small figure clung to him tightly. Matau Korea's heart surged with warmth, and his eyes instantly moistened. He hugged Sakura Matau, tears slowly streaming from the corners of his eyes. I'm sorry for making you worry. His voice was filled with guilt and self-blame. This child had endured too much pain. Sakura Matau's small hands tightly embraced Matau Korea. Although her palms were fragile, they conveyed endless warmth. Matau Korea wiped away his tears, his eyes growing firm. He knew he had to be strong in front of this child. What's your purpose? He looked up at Weiss. He knew there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world, and this mysterious man must be trying to get something from him. Chapter 213 Target. My goal is to seize the Holy Grail, and of course, you two are also valuable for research. At the word research, a surge of unease surged through Matau Korea's heart. Those two words pierced his heart like sharp thorns. His body instantly tensed, muscles flexing tightly as he assumed an attacking stance, like a beast ready to pounce. Don't worry, Weiss said, stirring the coffee slowly, the coffee swirling in the cup, emitting a rich aroma. It's not the kind of research you're thinking of, but research on the mind. Matau Korea's brows furrowed. As long as you can heal Sakura, I don't care what happens to me, Matau Korea said excitedly. Even if you dissect me, I don't mind. For Matau Sakura, he would give everything. I'm just asking you to cooperate with me. Don't say such horrible things. Pull up your sleeves. Weiss's voice was filled with resignation. Matau Korea hesitated, then slowly pulled up his sleeves, revealing 3 command seals. Weiss touched the command seals with his wand and felt a noticeable resistance. The resistance was like an invisible wall, blocking his exploration. His own strength alone couldn't reveal the true nature of the command seals, but he had the mind gem. The Holy Grail, heroic spirits, and Master were inherently unconnected. They were linked by the command seals after the ritual. This meant that the Holy Grail's condition could be glimpsed through the command seals. Everything went smoothly, and Weiss saw the Holy Grail within the black mud. It's indeed contaminated. The Holy Grail hadn't been summoned yet, making purification difficult. It's better to wait until the Holy Grail is summoned before attempting again. Weiss captured a tiny bit of the Holy Grail's aura. Weiss opened her hand, and the true Berserker roared in her palm. Weiss had collected Berserker just as it was about to dissipate, channeling a tiny bit of mana. Unexpectedly, Berserker resurrected. Heroic spirits are those who have passed away, their bodies now composed of mana. The stronger the mana, the greater the power the heroic spirit can exert. Since Weiss was disguising herself as Berserker, she had to be convincing. Armor, greatswords, and everything else were fully prepared. Of course, the essential element was the dark aura swirling around Berserker. Even with all this attire, he still looked a bit like Berserker. The next day, warm sunlight streamed through the windows, scattering across the city. However, the morning news added a touch of tension and unease to the otherwise tranquil atmosphere. The anchor solemnly reminded everyone to be careful with fire. Upon hearing the news, the citizens lamented the complete destruction of the Matau family, including 4 generations of grandparents and grandchildren. What a shame. They say the Matau family has been in this city for centuries, a gray-haired old man sighed, shaking his head. True or not? A young man nearby asked in astonishment, clearly taken aback by the news. That family is strange, another person interjected. The TV was also showing information on fire safety. Tasukato Kitami sat in his spacious study, quietly watching the news. A hint of confusion crossed his eyes, and he reached out to turn off the TV, lost in thought. This is different from the Matau family's usual style, he muttered to himself. He frowned slightly, recalling the mysterious and powerful displays of the Matau family in previous wars. After a moment's reflection, his gaze regained its composure. Never mind. Victory in this Holy Grail war will be mine. He turned off the TV, stood up, and gazed out the window at the bustling city. A few days later, All 7 masters arrived in Fuyuki City. As if sensing the approaching storm, the air was thick with tension. The Holy Grail War had officially begun, a fateful battle about to unfold. Each master, with their own beliefs and goals, prepared to seize victory. Mind magic, control. In the Fuyuki City Park, Weiss slowly raised his hand, and a powerful mental force radiated from him. Instantly, every animal in the park was controlled. From cats and dogs to those that had been hiding, they all stopped moving. Weiss transmitted the images of the 6 masters and 6 heroic spirits from his mind into their minds. The images played through the animals' minds like a movie. Every detail was clear, from the masters' faces and attire to the heroic spirits' unique demeanor and powerful aura. These images were etched deeply into the animals' minds, like a brand, imprinting their identities with unmistakable clarity. Find them. Keep an eye on them. Weiss's voice was deep and forceful, his command radiating through the minds of each controlled animal. Meow, a cat meowed softly, as if responding to Weiss's command. Woof, a dog barked. The animals slowly retreated, blending into Fuyuki City under the cover of night. How do you know the identities of the others? Who are you? Matao Korea asked. His eyes were filled with confusion and wariness. This mysterious man always made him uneasy. Wes Erwin, Weiss replied with a smile. Just a traveling magician. Matao Korea remained silent, then smiled bitterly. Why bother? I'm going to die soon anyway. His voice was filled with helplessness and despair. He knew his life was running out, and faced with this cruel fate, he felt incredibly insignificant and powerless. The two of them walked out of the park in silence, their figures lonesome in the night. They dressed like ordinary people and blended into the crowd. The streets weren't crowded, though, and everyone was in a hurry. A serial killer has been here recently, Matao Korea explained, his voice low and hoarse. If they were not caught, the government will impose a curfew. Weiss knew the serial killer was Ryunosuke Amiyu, a psychopath. He seemed to be the descendant of a magus, having successfully signed a contract with Castor to become one of the 7 masters in this Holy Grail War. Coincidentally, the one appearing this time as Castor was French Marshal Gilles de Rais, known for his bloodlust, debauchery, and obsession with the dark arts. The two of them seemed like kindred spirits. The key point was that Ryunosuke Amiyu didn't know any magic. His anti-detection skills were quite impressive for an ordinary person, but hiding from a magician was nearly impossible. He's the first target. Weiss chose his target. Chapter 214 Battle. Hey, Castor, let's go kill a few more. That kid's expression just now was amazing. Ryunosuke's voice was filled with frenzy and excitement, his eyes gleaming with cruelty as he recollected the horrifying scene. Castor was invisible at the moment, and to others, Ryunosuke looked like a man mumbling to himself. His twisted expression was no longer human, but one filled with evil and madness. Be patient, Ryunosuke. The Holy Grail War has begun. You have no means of self-preservation. If the other masters and heroic spirits discover you, they'll kill you. Castor's voice was low and raspy. Although Ryunosuke's personality and approach were very much to Castor's liking, he had to admit that this human's abilities were woefully inadequate. First, find a place to settle down and build a workshop. Arriving as Castor is a real disadvantage, but victory will be mine. Castor had only one wish, to resurrect his goddess. This was his obsession. Anything is fine, as long as I can kill without restraint. Ryunosuke licked his lips, his eyes filled with longing. I just wonder what a magician's touch feels like. His voice tinged with cruel anticipation. He imagined the scene of slaughtering a magician in his mind. Don't worry, there will be such an opportunity. Castor suddenly stopped and began to look around. His eyes were filled with vigilance, sensing a dangerous aura. What's wrong? Ryunosuke was also extremely alert, his body tense, ready to respond to any possible danger. Meow! A cat's meow broke the silence. Seeing that it was a few stray cats, Ryunosuke breathed a sigh of relief. Castor, you're too nervous. They're just some kittens. However, Castor stared at the kittens with those strange eyes, fixed on him. The kittens, sensing danger, arched their backs, their pupils dilated, and their fur stood on end. A tentacle emerged from Castor's robes and quickly shot out, wrapping around the kittens. At that moment, a long sword stabbed Ryunosuke from the darkness. Ryunosuke couldn't react at all. Just as the sword was about to pierce his throat, another tentacle wrapped around his waist, pulling him back and dodging the blow. Who's that? Castor stared at the shadows, warily shielding Ryunosuke behind him. Weiss emerged from the shadows. I was too focused on the angle, so I was a little slow. How I almost got killed. Ryunosuke touched his neck, where a bloody streak remained. Who are you? Castor demanded. Weiss didn't answer. He gripped his sword tightly with both hands and swung it across, sending Castor scrambling to avoid it. This is a good time to practice my physical skills in real combat, Weiss thought, swinging his sword repeatedly. His opponent was Castor, whose class limited him to melee combat. Is this guy a saber? An assassin? Castor speculated, then reconsidered his own guesses. His swordsmanship is too rusty. If we keep going like this, we'll attract other heroic spirits, Weiss calmly analyzed, quickly scanning the surroundings. Far from the crowds, the surroundings were completely silent, with only the occasional breeze bringing a faint, almost imperceptible sound. There was no sign of the other heroic spirits arriving, but he knew that if the battle continued, the fluctuations in magical energy would inevitably draw their attention. Then, with a flicker of his sleeve, 6 spheres flew out. Like nimble spirits, they quickly dispersed, flying in a precise trajectory. As they moved, a faint light gradually spread, enveloping a kilometer-wide barrier. Castor surveyed the barrier with bewilderment. A glint of thought flickered in his eerie eyes. He secretly speculated about Weiss's identity and purpose. He's a magician, but what about his servant? Could it be assassin? As far as he knew, only assassin's mysterious class could possibly elude his perception. At that moment, countless fireballs suddenly filled the barrier. These fireballs, like dazzling stars, radiated a blazing heat. Each fireball resembled a miniature sun, its brilliance so dazzling it was impossible to look directly at it. They rapidly converged around Castor. Boom, boom, a deafening roar echoed. The immense force of the impact caused the entire barrier to tremble slightly. The intense light of the explosion illuminated the entire barrier, making it feel as if one were engulfed in a sea of fire. The blast rippled through the surrounding trees, rustling small rocks and sending them careening into the air. A massive sea monster protected Castor and Ryunosuke. This octopus was immense, its body the size of a small mountain, its thick tentacles waving in the air. In the previous explosion, it had been blasted to pieces, its body covered in wounds. Some of its tentacles had been severed, and black liquid oozed from the wounds. Ryunosuke felt his skin tingle, his hair standing on end. Just as he looked up, a massive bolt of lightning struck him head first. The lightning was like that of an enraged dragon. Crack, with a resounding bang, the octopus was split in two. The powerful electrical current spread throughout its body, instantly wiping it out. However, just as the lightning was about to strike the two, an even larger sea monster appeared. This monster had over a dozen tentacles and a smooth, sleek skin. Each tentacle was covered in barbs, gleaming coldly in the light. When it crouched, it resembled a giant sea anemone, but as it slowly stretched out its body, it resembled an octopus. A demon from the deep sea. Castor closed the Ryun City textbook in dissatisfaction. His eyes were filled with frustration and resentment. Summoning a sea demon without water won't unleash its full power, he muttered to himself, filled with regret. Beside him, Ryunosuke exclaimed, "What the hell is this?" Amazing, his eyes were filled with excitement and curiosity, as if admiring a unique work of art. The sea demon seemed to be unable to tolerate the dryness of its surroundings, its massive, bizarre body trembling slightly. It opened its enormous mouth and spewed out a vast amount of seawater. The water surged out like a raging torrent, instantly filling the surrounding space. Because of the barrier, the water could not spread out. It was firmly confined within the barrier, and the water level rose higher and higher. The once dry land was quickly submerged by the sea, forming a small ocean world. The water surged continuously, making a gurgling sound. Chapter 215 First Kill. The sea monster gently swayed its numerous tentacles in the makeshift ocean, dancing slowly through the air like a giant python. Its smooth skin, soaked in the seawater, looked even more eerie, coated in a mysterious mucus that shone with an unsettling sheen. Its massive body swayed slightly in the water, each movement causing violent ripples in the seawater. Ryunosuke scoffed, his voice filled with triumph and madness. "You'll drown if you keep going like this." He did it on purpose, hoping to provoke Weiss and gain a twisted sense of pleasure. However, as a mere mortal, how could he possibly imagine the methods of a magician? Freeze! Snow began to fall within the barrier, the flakes fluttering like beautiful elves dancing in the air. Instantly, the water froze, and a thick layer of solid ice quickly spread. The sea monster's body began to freeze, its massive form encased in ice, transforming into gigantic ice sculpture. If the sea monster were so easy to deal with, it wouldn't be called such a terrifying monster. It twisted its body, and the ice shattered with a crisp sound. However, it was clearly not suited to such an environment, preferring the vast expanses and moist air of the ocean. It roared in discontent, a sound as deafening as thunder. Over a dozen tentacles lashed out at Weiss frantically, their immense force seemingly capable of destroying anything. But before they could even reach Weiss, the tentacles were severed. Uri Ryunosuke's face was filled with confusion, puzzled by what had happened. Castor, however, had discovered the secret. Its threads. His voice was filled with shock. The barrier was densely packed with threads, intertwined like a spider web. Thread magic, cut, Weiss shouted softly, and in an instant, all the threads converged towards Castor. The sharp threads, like blades, swiftly sliced through everything. The enormous sea monster was chopped into the size of dice. Ryunosuke, give the order, Castor shouted urgently. What order? At the critical moment, Uri Ryunosuke suddenly realized and shouted, block it. A command seal vanished from the back of his hand. At the same time, Castor unfurled a barrier. Sharp wires sliced against the barrier, rubbing and cutting with a piercing sound. Sparks flew from the collision between the barrier and the wires, like a dazzling display of fireworks. This was the worst-case scenario. Castor descended as a human, while the master was still a mere mortal. The sea demon couldn't unleash its full potential. Castor's heart was filled with helplessness and despair. Time, location, and people were all unfavorable. He could think of no solution and could only struggle on. His magic power was rapidly depleting, and Ryunosuke Uri couldn't replenish it. I should have sacrificed a group of children to conserve some magic power. His heart was filled with regret, but it was too late. Both of them were at their last gasp, like a candle in the wind, ready to go out at any moment. Weiss wasn't going to miss this opportunity. He stretched his right arm back as far as he could, as if to throw a javelin. A golden spear appeared in his right hand. He gripped it tightly, feeling its weight. Great strength, strong, precision. Weiss cast several buff spells on himself. A powerful aura emanated from his body. Taking a deep breath, the muscles in his right arm bulged, veins popping. He aimed at the two men, his gaze like a hunter taking aim at his prey. With all his might, he hurled his spear. In the blink of an eye, it reached the two men. Uri Ryunosuke had no time to issue an order, and Castor, unable to dodge, could only resist. However, his shield was pierced the moment of contact, piercing Castor's body. Castor felt his body crumbling. Damn, this spear has a demon-breaking effect, he roared. What the hell are you? Before he could finish his words, he dissipated, returning to the Holy Grail. Castor, Uri Ryunosuke reached out, trying to grasp something, but he couldn't. The next second, black flames erupted from his body. He let out a horrifying wail of pain. Weiss watched the pervert incinerate, his eyes devoid of any pity. After confirming the pair's death, Weiss released the barrier and departed. A few minutes later, Lancer arrived. Master, the battle is over. Lancer's voice was steady and powerful as he respectfully reported the situation to his master. His tall, straight figure appeared remarkably dignified in the dim light, his spear lowered slightly as he remained on guard. According to the battlefield situation, one of the combatants was Castor. A hint of alarm flashed in his eyes, and the lingering magical energy on the battlefield was intense. What was the result? The master's voice came over the communicator, tinged with eagerness and anticipation. A master and servant were killed, Lancer replied succinctly. Is that so? Return first, the master commanded decisively. Yes, Lancer swiftly withdrew. His movements were nimble and light, like a cheetah darting through the night. In a few breaths, he vanished into the darkness. Seconds later, several masked figures appeared, their figures looming in the darkness like ghosts. What a shame we didn't get to see the fight, one of them whispered, his voice thick with regret. I don't even know what they look like, another added, a hint of resignation in his tone. Let's go back, the leader said decisively. Several people became transparent, as if blending into the air, vanishing. Several more waves arrived, inspecting the battlefield before departing. Weiss had already returned to her own dimension. So soon? Matau Korea asked, his voice thick with surprise. Castor didn't bring out his full potential. He would have been a bit more difficult to deal with in the ocean, Weiss said calmly. Matau Korea didn't know what to say. In his heart, even the weakest heroic spirits were pioneers who had left a lasting mark on human history. They possessed immense power and mysterious abilities, inspiring awe. Matau Korea silently gazed at Weiss, his heart filled with emotion. He knew that in this Holy Grail war, every heroic spirit was a formidable opponent, and Weiss's strength was even more unfathomable. He didn't know where this war would end. But he knew that he had to follow Weiss closely in order to realize his wish. Just wait, Tasaka Tokiyami, I will kill you with my own hands. He clenched his fists. Chapter 216 An Unexpected Encounter. In a traditional Chinese restaurant, warm yellow lights cast a cozy and comfortable atmosphere. The wooden tables and chairs exuded a delicate fragrance, and exquisite Chinese landscape paintings hung on the walls, transporting one to an ancient Oriental land. Weiss, along with Matau Korea and Matau Sakura, sat at a clean, tidy table, quietly awaiting their meal. Rumor had it that the chef was a certified Chinese chef. This news only heightened Weiss's anticipation for the ensuing meal. Is it really okay to be so early? Aren't you afraid of a sneak attack? Matau Korea surveyed his surroundings warily, his eyes filled with unease. His body tensed slightly, ready for any possible danger. His hands unconsciously rested on his waist, where his weapon lay hidden. Don't worry, Weiss said, flipping through the menu. My appearance hasn't been exposed, and I'm monitoring everything. Let's enjoy the food. His voice was filled with confidence and composure, as if he had everything under control. Matau Korea still couldn't fully relax, his entire body was tense. His eyes darted around, never missing a single suspicious sign. His heart was filled with worry. This Holy Grail war was fraught with danger and uncertainty. He didn't know what would happen next. Matau Sakura clutched a drink, swinging her legs. Her eyes were filled with curiosity and excitement, and she was brimming with interest in everything around her. Over the past few days, she had gradually regained some of her childish, lively side, a touch of life. The dishes arrived quickly. Weiss examined the presentation and sniffed the food. It's got a nice aroma from the wok, Weiss said, picking up his chopsticks with satisfaction, his eyes filled with admiration. Eat it while it's hot. Weiss picked up a piece of twice-cooked pork. The chef's knife skills were evident, each slice of meat cut to an even thickness. The slices shimmered in the light, a tempting sheen that was truly mouth-watering. The aroma of fermented black beans constantly tantalized Weiss's taste buds, a rich fragrance filling his mouth. Weiss devoured the meat slices, mixed with white rice, one by one, with relish. In a short while, Weiss had finished a plate of stir-fried pork belly with garlic sprouts. He couldn't get enough. Boss, another helping, Weiss shouted. Yes, the boss's voice echoed from the kitchen, full of enthusiasm. Looking at the stunned two, Weiss smiled and said, don't just stand there and start eating. Weiss scooped a spoonful of mapo tofu onto the rice. The bright red bean curd soaked through the rice, emitting an alluring aroma. In a short while, Weiss had finished 3 bowls of rice. My appetite has increased after strengthening my body, he thought to himself. An hour later, the table was piled high with plates and bowls. Weiss took a sip of tea, ignoring the staring eyes around him. Matau Korea quickly paid the bill and left the restaurant. Matau Sakura stared at Weiss's flat stomach with wide eyes, curious. She tilted her head, trying to imagine what kind of magical space in Weiss's stomach could accommodate so much food. Let's get out of here. You've already attracted too much attention, Matau Korea said anxiously, his eyes darting around. Everyone he saw as an enemy now, every passerby a potential threat. His body tensed slightly, ready for any possible danger. Unease filled his heart. The Holy Grail War had made him extra vigilant. Weiss, on the other hand, was relaxed, a faint smile on his face, oblivious to everything around him. It's broad daylight, and we're on the streets. No one would choose a time like this to start a fight, he said in a calm, confident voice. A rule of the Holy Grail War was that ordinary people couldn't be affected, everything was conducted in seclusion. Heroic spirits chose secluded locations to avoid unnecessary trouble. Even so, be careful, Matau Korea rambled on like an old woman. His tone was filled with worry, and he kept reminding Weiss and Matau Sakura to be cautious. However, Weiss ignored him. Amidst the crowd, a woman with white hair and a blonde hair stood out. Their beauty and elegance were impossible to ignore, like two brilliant pearls gleaming in the crowd. Iris Veal von Eansburn, Matau Korea exclaimed, his voice filled with surprise and shock. He had never expected to encounter another master here. The two women turned to look at him, their eyes filled with confusion and wariness. Who are you? Altria shielded Alice behind her, her eyes filled with vigilance. Be careful, this person must be the master. Her voice was steady, powerful, and full of vigilance. In preparation for the Holy Grail War, all other magicians in Fuyuki City had been purged, leaving only the 7 masters participating in the Holy Grail War. Only the other masters could reveal Alice's full name. Before the Holy Grail War, Matau Korea was just an ordinary person, careless for a moment. The correct course of action should have been to feign ignorance and stalk and ambush them. Matau Korea deeply regretted his reckless behavior. Weiss's hand rested firmly on Matau Korea's shoulder, the perfect pressure to comfort him without causing him any pressure. Relax, now is not the time to fight. Weiss's voice was steady and calm, like a tranquil lake, soothing the turmoil of a heart. The streets were bustling with people, bustling with activity. The two groups stood face to face across the crowd, the air frozen. Artoria's eyes fixed on Weiss, her gaze filled with vigilance and inquiry. The question, what class is he, swirled in her mind. She tried to find some clue from Weiss, to gauge his strength and threat. You want to fight? Weiss asked, his tone casual. Yet, a subtle glint shone in his eyes, one of confidence and composure. There can only be one winner, Artoria said, her expression serious. Her voice was firm and powerful, brimming with determination. Indeed, a fight is inevitable, Weiss said, his lips curling up in a confident smile. I don't mind. You choose the place, he challenged Artoria. Wes's full confidence put a lot of pressure on the two women, and they felt the powerful aura coming from Wes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Bait. Saber, now is not the time to fight, Iris Veal's voice echoed in Artoria's mind. The two spoke directly through telekinesis, a unique method of communication that allowed them to communicate unnoticed. Iris Veal's voice was filled with concern and reason, she knew now was not the best time to fight. Artoria nodded slightly, agreeing with Iris Veal. Let's go back first, she whispered softly. The two slowly retreated, their movements cautious and careful, ever vigilant. Artoria's eyes never left Weiss. After they disappeared into the crowd, Weiss remained standing quietly, showing no sign of attacking. I'm sorry, it's all my fault, Matau Korea lowered his head, his face filled with apology. No need. My identity would have been exposed sooner or later, Weiss said lightly, suddenly remembering something. By the way, from now on, I'm Caster. Matau Korea's face was filled with confusion. Aren't you a berserker? His eyes were filled with bewilderment, wondering why Weiss had suddenly changed her identity. My physical skills are far inferior to those of other heroic spirits, and I'll be discovered quickly. I've already taken care of Caster, so assuming his identity won't be a problem, Weiss said nonchalantly, a confident smile on his face. It was just a minor strategic adjustment, one that wouldn't significantly impact their plans. Matau Korea held his forehead and said helplessly, as long as you're happy. He knew he couldn't change Weiss's decision, so he could only accept it. Don't worry, victory will definitely be ours. Weiss's voice was firm and powerful, brimming with confidence. Elsewhere, Altria sped down the highway in her car. Her A-rank riding ability ensured safety even in the constant flow of traffic. The car, like a cheetah, darted across the road, leaving a blurry trail behind. Saber, Alice, sitting in the back, gazed worriedly out the window at the traffic. I have a bad feeling, Altria's voice was low and serious, her eyes gleaming with alarm. As a heroic spirit, her intuition was sharp, and she could sense the presence of danger around her. You're saying, Alice's voice trembled slightly, that guy will catch up. Artoria dialed Imai Kiritsugu's number and handed it to Alice. After a moment, Alice hung up. Okay, I understand, her voice was filled with resignation and worry. Kiritsugu said we should contain him if there's a chance. Artoria slammed her right hand on the steering wheel, making a dull sound. Is that guy using his wife as bait? Her voice was filled with anger and dissatisfaction. In her opinion, Emilia Kiritsugu's actions were unacceptable and irresponsible to Alice. Saber, Kiritsugu just, Alice tried to explain, but her words were weak. She knew that Emilia Kiritsugu's approach was the right one, and that they had to make some sacrifices to achieve ultimate victory. Artoria remained silent, her heart filled with conflict and struggle. As a heroic spirit, her mission was to fight to fulfill her master's wishes. But in the process, she had to face some difficult choices. Ultimately, Artoria decided to follow instructions. She drove into the forest, hoping to use the terrain to her advantage and detain Weiss. The car whirled through the forest, kicking up a cloud of dust. Weiss, floating in the sky, saw it and followed. He could guess it was a trap. But he wasn't afraid. He saw it as a contest of wits and strength. Now it depended on each player's tactics to determine who would prevail. The car plunged into the forest, slowing down. The uneven road, like a winding python, was riddled with bumps and obstacles, not suitable for high-speed driving. The wheels clunked over the potholes. Countless light bullets shot down from the sky like meteors, their powerful force instantly piercing branches and trees. Once sturdy branches snapped under the impact, and leaves fell like snowflakes. The trees were riddled with holes, and wood chips flew everywhere. Artoria steered the car nimbly, trying to dodge the barrage of light bullets. Her eyes were focused and calm, her hands firmly gripping the steering wheel, constantly adjusting the direction. However, the light bullets were too dense, hitting the car one after another. The car's body shook continuously, and thick smoke billowed out, threatening to explode at any moment. Artoria acted decisively, picked up Alice and quickly jumped out of the car. Their figures were as light as birds, and they instantly left the nearly wrecked car. After landing, Artoria ran without hesitation into the depths of the woods. Alice clung tightly to Artoria's arms. However, a stone wall suddenly rose up ahead, blocking the path. Behind, Iris Veal shouted, her voice filled with fear, as if she had witnessed something terrifying. Artoria quickly turned around and saw black flames behind them, like a surging ocean wave, about to hit the two of them. A sword suddenly appeared in Artoria's hand, its scabbard gleaming with a mysterious light. A barrier quickly enveloped Iris Veal, and without hesitation, she drew her sword and cleaved the sea of fire. The flames instantly split in two at the stroke of her sword, dispersing to either side. Weiss slowly emerged, a faint smile on his face. As expected of Saber, or the King of Knights, his voice brimming with admiration, identity revealed. The two women exchanged a glance, filled with surprise. They hadn't expected the other to discern Saber's identity so quickly. Artoria pointed the holy sword Excalibur at Weiss, her eyes filled with wariness. "Tell me your name." Her voice was firm, powerful, and imbued with authority. Weiss spread her hands, a resigned smile on her face. "I'm not a knight," Artoria frowned. "You're such a stickler," Weiss said, suddenly attacking. "Disarm you." The spell instantly struck Artoria, but it had no effect. Artoria possessed the anti-magic power to negate magic circles and the Great Instant Contract. Modern magicians are basically unable to harm her. Magic below A will be negated. Combined with her saber class, she is a complete magician killer. This is more interesting. Weiss held the wand in her right hand. Chapter 218 Purpose. That would be more interesting. Weiss gripped his wand in his right hand. His target this time wasn't Saber. She was certainly a formidable opponent, though. The most formidable is Avalon, Weiss pondered. Avalon, impervious to all physical interference, leaves no trace of any physical attack. Furthermore, it resists interference from all parallel worlds, making its defenses inaccessible to any force from any dimension or time. In this world, Avalon is recognized as the strongest guardian. It can create an absolute defense that even the 5 great magics cannot reach. However, there are other solutions. Avalon may be flawless, but the Night King does. Weiss began carefully analyzing the Night King's movements and weaknesses, searching for a chance to break through. Weiss plunged his wand into the ground. Gudong, the ground began to tremble slightly, and then, magma surged from the ground, spreading rapidly like a raging flood. Within seconds, the terrain for several kilometers had transformed. Lava continued to erupt, its scorching heat reducing everything around it to ash. Using magic to alter the terrain, it's definitely Caster, Artoria and Iris Veal thought simultaneously. However, with so many famous magicians in history, their identities remained uncertain. Artoria wore blue armor, accentuating her heroic presence. Her gaze was determined and courageous, and she clutched the holy sword Excalibur tightly. Iris also used magic to ward off the intense heat. While her magical power wasn't as strong as Artoria's, it was still sufficient to protect her. Saber, casting such powerful spells consumes a lot of mana. Attack him head-on to force his master out, Iris said anxiously. In this battle, victory depended on finding the enemy's weakness as quickly as possible. Artoria nodded, her eyes filled with determination. Protect yourself, she warned, and then she rushed towards Weiss. Her speed was as fast as lightning, covering dozens of meters in an instant. Weiss flicked her wand, and lava erupted beneath Artoria's feet. The blazing lava shot up like a fountain. Artoria dodged it with a swift and decisive roll. Without a pause, she continued to charge at Weiss. Streams of lava erupted, like the wrath of the earth. Artoria's nimble movements closed the distance between her and Weiss. She darted through the lava like a nimble swallow. The holy sword in her hand gleamed with a cold light, its chilling aura sending shivers down her spine. Weiss could already sense the chill. Artoria was swift, her sword about to pierce Weiss's chest. Weiss's face broke into a brilliant smile, a smile tinged with pride and cunning. He vanished instantly, teleporting to Alice's side the next moment. Alice reacted swiftly, casting a magic spell to resist Weiss almost the instant he appeared. However, her actions were ultimately no match for Weiss's preparedness. Golden chains flew out like serpents, instantly binding Alice's body tightly. Weiss knew that Alice was only Saber's acting master. Iris Veal von Eansburn was a homunculus, the Eansburn family's crowning achievement. Weiss's goal was to capture Alice alive. Alice struggled fiercely, trying to resist the sudden restraints. No, Weiss whispered softly, a hint of coldness in her tone. The chains instantly unleashed powerful blue lightning, pulsing through Alice's body. Ah! Alice screamed in agony, her body trembling violently. Alice, Altria's eyes were bloodshot, brimming with rage and anxiety. Despicable, she roared, her voice filled with condemnation of Weiss. This is war, not a one-on-one duel, Weiss sneered. You're so naive, his words pierced Artoria's heart like a sharp blade. A dimensional rift appeared behind Weiss. Goodbye, Night King, Weiss' voice was tinged with pride. Stop, Artoria shouted. But Weiss wouldn't listen. He dragged Alice with him and walked into the dimensional rift without hesitation. Artoria was about to unleash her holy sword, ready to unleash her most powerful attack. But Weiss blocked Alice in front of him and sneered, if you're not afraid of killing her, then do it. Artoria's body froze, her eyes filled with pain and resignation. How naive, Weiss said, and vanished into the dimensional rift with Alice. The rift quickly closed, as if it had never existed. Artoria stared blankly at the place where Weiss had disappeared, filled with regret and anger. But for a moment, she didn't know what to do. A few minutes later, Emilia Kiritsugu hurried to the scene. His eyes were calm and sharp, scanning the surroundings. Seeing the landscape, distorted beyond recognition by the lava, and Altria standing there in a state of despair, Emilia Kiritsugu had a vague idea of what had happened. What are the details? His voice was calm and composed, unlike the reaction of a man whose wife had been kidnapped. There was no trace of panic in his tone. Altria mechanically recounted the events, her voice thick with self-blame and regret. She described in detail the enemy's attack methods, the power of their magic, and the circumstances of Alice's abduction. As Emilia Kiritsugu surveyed the battlefield, he analyzed, the enemy's initial target was Alice. They didn't use special magic initially to lure you off guard and away from her. His eyes were focused and sharp, taking in every detail. He carefully observed the marks on the ground, the damaged trees, and the lingering magical aura, trying to find any clues about the enemy. Altria clenched her fists, her knuckles crackling. Anger and self-blame filled her heart, feeling that she had failed to protect Alice. They didn't kill Alice right away. They probably guessed she wasn't the true master. Emilia Kiritsugu calmly analyzed the enemy's motives. He knew they must have other motives for sparing Alice's life. Emilia Kiritsugu turned and prepared to leave. Wait a minute, aren't we going to rescue Alice? Altria asked anxiously. Her eyes were filled with anticipation, hoping that Emilia Kiritsugu could find a way to save Alice. Chapter 219 Research. Who are the enemies? Emilia Kiritsugu asked instead of answering Artoria's question. Castor, Artoria replied without hesitation. Where is the enemy's base? Emilia Kiritsugu continued. Artoria remained silent. She had no idea where the enemy's base was. Her heart was filled with helplessness and regret, feeling completely useless. "We are completely passive, and can only wait for them to contact us," Emilia Kiritsugu said calmly. He knew that blindly searching for the enemy was futile in this situation. They had to wait for the enemy to contact them first before they could have the chance to rescue Alice. "I'm sorry, I failed in my duty. As Alice's bodyguard, Artoria had an unshirkable responsibility. No, it was my poor decision." Emilia Kiritsugu slowly lit the cigarette in his mouth, the flame of the lighter swaying in the breeze, as if reflecting on the turmoil within him. His eyes lowered slightly, watching the flickering flame, a surge of inexpressible self-reproach welling up within him. He wasn't as indifferent as he appeared. Beneath that calm exterior, his heart was like a raging sea, brimming with anxiety and worry. "Alice, wait for me. I will definitely rescue you." Weiss brought Alice back to the dimension, a development that was beyond Matau Korea's expectations. "You didn't kill her?" Matau Korea's eyes widened, his face filled with confusion. "She's not the master," Weiss replied. Matau Korea was even more bewildered, his eyes filled with puzzlement. He couldn't understand why Weiss would let Alice go, a woman clearly one of the enemy. Even more baffling was Alice's question, "How do you know you possess some kind of precognitive ability, even as a captive?" Alice continued to pry for information, hoping to find some clue in Weiss's answers. Weiss didn't answer her. Alice surveyed the surroundings, her first impression of emptiness. Is this his magic workshop or some kind of inherent barrier? She speculated in her mind, gathering as much information as she could. "Ms. Eansburn, you don't seem to realize you're a captive. Is it because you're the vessel of the Holy Grail, feeling safe and secure?" Weiss's voice tinged with sarcasm, his eyes filled with amusement. "How did you know?" Alice's voice trembled slightly, her heart filled with shock. She hadn't expected Weiss to know her identity, a secret known only to the Eansburn family. "The Eansburn alchemy is truly remarkable, creating androids," Weiss exclaimed as he examined Alice's body. He was filled with curiosity, as if examining a precious work of art. "Her magic power is twice that of an ordinary magus, and she's in excellent health," Weiss muttered to himself, his voice thick with surprise. Alice resisted Weiss's inspection, a blush rising to her cheeks. She felt her body violated, filled with anger and humiliation. Have normal emotions, and ultimately, be able to give birth to children. How on earth did the Eansburn family manage to do that? Weiss's voice rose, like a child finding a toy they'd always loved. "Carrie, I'll leave the task of monitoring the others to you." Weiss was eager to study Alice, his voice thick with urgency. "Me?" Matau Korea pointed at himself in disbelief, his eyes filled with surprise. He hadn't expected Weiss to entrust him with such an important task. "Don't worry, it's easy." Weiss tapped his index finger on Matau Korea's forehead. Various images flashed through his mind, scenes he could discern from Fuyuki City. "The animals will notify you when they spot a master or a heroic spirit." Weiss handed Matau Korea a button. "Press this button and I'll receive a notification." With that, Weiss disappeared with Alice, leaving Matau Korea and Sakura staring at each other. Weiss gently placed Alice on the lab table. The cold surface caused Alice's body to tremble slightly. Her pupils dilated sharply, her eyes filled with fear and anxiety. She sensed the terrible things about to happen, and a wave of despair welled up within her. "Don't worry, I'll be gentle." Wes's voice was low and gentle, as if comforting a frightened child. However, to Alice, his words sounded like the whisper of a demon, further frightening her. Wes first carefully examined Alice, as if examining a precious experiment. "The body and appearance are no different from ordinary people, but the internal structure is different." He pondered in his mind, his hands moving without a pause. A sharp scalpel quietly appeared in Wes's hand, the cold blade gleaming in the light. Under Alice's horrified eyes, Wes cut her skin without hesitation. However, Alice felt no pain. "Don't worry, I've blocked your pain," Wes said, staring into Alice's eyes. "In return, I hope you will cooperate with me." "Don't even think about it," Alice refused decisively, her voice filled with stubbornness and unyielding determination. Despite her predicament, her faith remained unwavering. She knew she couldn't surrender to the enemy, couldn't reveal the Eansburn family's secrets. "Is that so?" Weiss's tone held no trace of surprise, having anticipated Alice's reaction. Without hesitation, he used the Mind Stone's power to control her. Instantly, Alice was answering every question. However, as a tool, she knew very little about the Eansburn secrets. Weiss's face flickered with regret, He had hoped to gain more information from Alice. The experiment continued until Mataukaria pressed a button. Weiss paused and slowly walked out of the lab. "You're finally out." Mataukaria's voice was filled with anxiety and uneasiness. He quickly approached Weiss, his expression utterly apprehensive. "A battle has broken out at the port, will you come with me?" Mataukaria seemed to waver. However, as his gaze fell on Matau Sakura, standing nearby, that hesitation vanished. "Sakura still needs my care." He knew that in this perilous moment, Matau Sakura needed his company and protection even more than ever. "Whatever you say." Weiss's tone was calm. He narrowed his eyes slightly, as if thinking about something. Then, he adjusted his state slightly, making himself more relaxed and focused. Chapter 220 Gold Glitter. Lancer's spear, like a nimble dragon, danced through the air, tracing sharp trajectories as he stabbed Artoria repeatedly. His movements were swift and powerful, each strike imbued with immense momentum. "What's wrong, Saber? You're not paying attention. Are you looking down on me?" Lancer's voice was filled with anger, his eyes fixed on Artoria, questioning her contempt. "I'm sorry." Artoria could sense that Lancer was a true knight, and her absent-mindedness had truly been an insult to him. She gathered her thoughts and focused her full attention on the battle, knowing that only in this way could she give Lancer the respect he deserved. The swords and spears in their hands clashed repeatedly, making crisp sounds. Each collision unleashed a powerful wave of air, shaking the air around them. Ding, 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 sparks flew, like brilliant fireworks bursting across the night sky. The two were evenly matched in physical combat, neither gaining the upper hand. Their movements were lightning fast, dazzling the eyes. Those hiding in the shadows silently observed the battle, their eyes filled with anticipation and vigilance. They hoped to discover a weakness in either man, so they could strike at the opportune moment. Ideally, both would be harmed, allowing them to reap the benefits. "Lancer, retreat immediately." The master's command suddenly echoed in Lancer's mind. A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes, his blood boiling, his heart brimming with a thirst for battle. "Please allow me to fight Saber to the bitter end." Lancer's voice was filled with determination and perseverance, his eyes fixed on Artoria. She is a worthy opponent. His heart was filled with respect for Artoria, and he refused to give up this battle so easily. "This is an order." The master's voice was filled with authority and inviolability. Loyalty was ingrained in Lancer's bones. Whether in life or now, he would never disobey an order. Lancer's face was filled with reluctance, his eyes filled with helplessness and regret. "Saber, we'll leave our battle for another time." A rumbling roar of thunder echoed from the sky, a sound like the galloping of thousands of horses, thrilling and heart-shaking. Thunderclouds obscured the sky above the port, like a black curtain shrouding the entire battlefield. A sturdy divine bull slowly descended from the sky, pulling a chariot. The chariot exuded an ancient and mysterious aura, as if it had stepped out of a mythical world. Atop the chariot, a massive red-haired man held the reins. He was tall, muscular, and immensely powerful. He had short, fiery red hair and a fiery red beard that cascaded down his chin, merging into his sideburns. His stubby, fiery red eyebrows and crimson eyes exuded majesty and dominance. He wore a red cotton windbreaker, maroon wrist guards, brown armor, and a battle skirt. "My name is Iskander, the King of Conquerors." His voice, powerful and resounding like thunder, echoed throughout the port. His eyes were filled with confidence and arrogance, as if the world rested at his feet. "This time, I'll participate in the Holy Grail War as a rider." A thin man, presumably a boy, hurriedly stopped him. "Stop talking. All your information has been leaked." His voice was filled with anxiety and worry. However, Iskander ignored his master. "Hey, after seeing the thrilling battle between Saber and Lancer, are you still planning to hide?" Iskander's voice was like a resounding bell, deafening. His eyes were filled with defiance and anticipation, challenging those hiding in the shadows. "You are all names that have been etched in history. Do you really want to spy on others' battles like rats hiding in the shadows? It's a disgrace to your reputation as heroes." His voice was filled with contempt for those cowards. His heroic attitude made it impossible to dislike him. Waver's face was as pale as the first snow in winter, devoid of a trace of blood. His body trembled slightly, helpless as a fallen leaf in the autumn wind. "Rider, stop talking. This will cause public outrage." His voice was filled with urgent pleading. However, Iskander remained unfazed. He lifted his lips slightly, revealing a bold smile filled with fearlessness. "Is that so?" His voice resonated like a bell, resonating through the air, brimming with unshakable confidence and arrogance. Getting angry over something like this shows they're nothing more than that. At that moment, a slender, golden-haired, crimson-eyed heroic spirit appeared above the streetlight. He was like a god from myth, emanating a sacred and inviolable aura. He was clad in golden armor, which gleamed brilliantly in the moonlight, dazzling like the sun. He gazed down upon the crowd from above, his eyes filled with majesty and arrogance, as if he were the master of all creation, and all must submit to him. What a bold statement. There is only one king in this world. His voice was deep and powerful, each word imbued with immense authority and dominance. Gilgamesh's arrogant demeanor and words stunned everyone. His golden armor exuded an ancient and mysterious aura, as if forged from countless legends and glories. Every detail shone a light on his nobility and might, creating a formidable awe. "You bastards, who allowed you to look directly at me?" His voice was filled with anger and arrogance, as if everyone before him were mere ants. Countless golden noble phantasms materialized behind him, each emanating a powerful aura, creating an irresistible pressure. How could this be? The sheer number of noble phantasms stunned everyone. HMPH, Gilgamesh raised his head proudly, his demeanor like a proud lion. "You bastards, let me show you the king's treasure house." With his words, he launched his attack. Swish, 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 the noble phantasms shot towards the crowd with unbridled force. They carried immense power. However, the crowd refused to surrender, each one blocking the onslaught. Weiss, hidden in the shadows, was also forced out. Castor, upon spotting Weiss, Altria rushed over, sword in hand. Her eyes burned with rage, as if she wanted to burn Weiss to ashes. "Hey, Saber, your opponent is me." Lancer tried to stop her, his voice filled with anxiety. "Lancer, get out of there," the master's voice echoed in his mind. Unable to refuse the order, Lancer reluctantly left. Lancer was incredibly loyal, but he met a master who didn't understand him. Chapter 221, a great start but a small end. Weiss wasn't paying attention to Saber. His eyes were fixed on Gilgamesh, pondering a response. Saber's actions infuriated Gilgamesh. "Who gave you permission to act, you bastard?" His voice filled with anger and arrogance. Various noble phantasms shot towards Saber like arrows. Saber swung her sword to block them, her movement swift and decisive, each swing carrying immense power. That's it, the king of conquerors, standing by, drew his sword and came to Saber's rescue. "Two bastards," Gilgamesh said disdainfully, his eyes filled with contempt. "Think you can defeat me by sheer numbers?" More noble phantasms materialized behind him. "This is going to be a headache." The king of conquerors scratched the back of his head helplessly. He hadn't expected Gilgamesh to be so arrogant, to completely disregard them. "Saber, retreat." Emilia Kiritsugu's command came clearly through his earpiece. But Saber's tone was filled with reluctance. Her eyes were fixed on Weiss before her, her sword still tightly gripped. "The situation is too complicated right now. A conflict with Castor would only allow others to take advantage." Emilia Kiritsugu's voice echoed again, calmly analyzing the situation. Saber knew what Kiritsugu said was true. In this chaotic battlefield, the slightest mistake could put them on the defensive. "Castor will eventually be left alone, and I have a plan." Emilia Kiritsugu's words shone with a hint of confidence, reassuring Saber. Saber sheathed her sword and prepared to retreat. Although she deeply desired to reclaim Alice, now was not the right time. "Scum!" Gilgamesh's arrogant voice suddenly rang out, launching an attack without a word. His eyes were filled with contempt, as if everyone before him were insignificant dents. The attack came like a torrential rain, targeting all three of them. A dimensional rift opened in front of Weiss, and another quietly appeared behind Gilgamesh. Weiss skillfully deflected Gilgamesh's attack onto him. Gilgamesh finally uttered another sound, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Interesting trick, but how could the king be hurt by his own weapon? He had just finished speaking when the noble phantasm stopped just 3 inches away from him. His powerful magic controlled the noble phantasms, preventing them from harming him. "No way around it, I have to use force," Weiss thought to himself. His whole body was ablaze with lightning, which danced around him like silver snakes. Under his control, the lightning converged into the shape of an eagle. The eagle was lifelike. The magnetic field generated caused all the surrounding electrical equipment to malfunction, making a crackling sound. The eagle rose high into the sky and swooped down towards Jin Shanshan like a predator. "Tisk, scum," Jin Shanshan said disdainfully. A golden spear shot out instantly, flying towards the eagle. The spear pierced the eagle, but the eagle was not flesh and blood, and the lightning intertwined to form an eagle again. He doubled his speed and rushed towards Jin Shanshan again. A shield loomed above Gilgamesh's head, radiating a golden glow as dazzling as the sun. The two collided with a resounding bang. The resulting airflow sent surrounding containers flying, helpless like leaves in a gust of wind. Gilgamesh remained unscathed, a single scorch mark left on his shield. "Oh, quite capable. You've performed well for a clown," Gilgamesh commented, his tone filled with arrogance and disdain. What a wicked fellow. Weiss, Saber, and the King of Conquerors all shared the same thought. Each of them stood in a delicate balance, forming a delicate equilibrium. Saber stared intently at Weiss, ready to charge and fight at the first opportunity. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, treated everyone with equal disdain, his eyes filled with a sense of superiority. The King of Conquerors had not expected this. "Rider, let's go," Waver whispered, his voice thick with fear. "You're too timid," the King of Conquerors said, disdainfully, of his master. Retreating at this point would be tantamount to admitting defeat. "We must outmaneuver them." He was as bold and confident as ever. "A bunch of bastards." Gilgamesh paused just as he was about to strike, then abruptly left the scene. Everyone looked at each other, unsure of what had happened. "It must be his master giving the order," Waver speculated. "It's hard to believe such a proud fellow would obey orders." Waver simply wanted to leave this dangerous place, not giving it much thought. "Stop talking, Rider, let's go," Waver urged the King of Conquerors, his voice filled with anxiety. But Saber and Castor seemed to be about to fight. The King of Conquerors looked on, his eyes brimming with anticipation. He didn't want to miss this exciting battle and wanted to stay and watch. "If you want to fight here, I'm always here to join you." Weiss raised her chin slightly and hooked her finger, her expression filled with defiance and confidence. Saber gritted her teeth, her eyes burning with anger. She gripped her sword tightly, ready to charge and fight Weiss to the death. Hatred for Weiss filled her heart. "Huh? It seems they have an old grudge." The King of Conquerors stroked his beard, his eyes lighting up as if he had discovered something interesting. He watched Weiss and Saber with interest, secretly speculating about their story. "Hey!" he suddenly roared, his voice as loud as thunder, startling not only Waver but also drawing the attention of Weiss and Saber. Waver shuddered at the sudden roar, staring at the King of Conquerors in fear, unsure of his next move. "I won't interfere in your fight." The King of Conquerors' voice was filled with boldness and unrestrained abandon. Weiss sighed silently, he had no desire to fight in the first place. 3 gunshots rang out in the distance. It was Emiya Kiritsugu urging Saber to retreat. Emiya Kiritsugu was a calm and rational man. He knew that fighting Castor at this moment was not a wise choice. He hoped Saber would obey his orders and avoid unnecessary risks. "Your master is telling you to return home," Weiss said provocatively, his lips curled up slightly in a mocking smile. "The King of Knights has become someone else's loyal dog, you bastard." Artoria's eyes blazed with anger and resentment. She was a proud knight with her own dignity and convictions. However, she also knew that as a servant, she must obey her master's orders. She gripped her sword tightly, her heart filled with conflict and struggle. But ultimately, she obeyed her master's orders, adhering to her knight's oath, and turned to leave the battlefield. Chapter 222 Situation. Only Weiss, the King of Conquerors, and Waver were left at the scene, and the atmosphere suddenly became somewhat tense. "Castor, would you like to have a drink together?" the King of Conquerors boldly invited. "Rider," Waver's voice rose an octave, his face filled with astonishment and confusion. "Anyone participating in the Holy Grail War is an enemy." "What the hell are you thinking?" Waver anxiously looked at the King of Conquerors, trying to get him to retract this insane invitation. However, the King of Conquerors ignored his master, his gaze fixed on Weiss, awaiting his response. Weiss narrowed her eyes slightly, and after a moment's silence, she boarded the chariot. "Ha ha!" the King of Conquerors roared with laughter, his laugh resounding like thunder, filled with grandeur and confidence. "I know a good place." The divine bull pulled the chariot skyward. Fuyuki City lay beneath the 3 of them, the cars below looking as small as matchboxes. The King of Conquerors parked the chariot atop Fuyuki City's tallest building, a skyscraper that soared into the sky. He stepped out of his chariot and surveyed the city, his eyes filled with wonder. "I never imagined that a mere ordinary person could build such a magnificent city." His voice was filled with emotion, a marvel at human ingenuity. This is just a small town in Japan. A truly large city has a population exceeding 20 million, Waver whispered. Oh, that's more than the population of the lands I rule. How fascinating. This world is becoming increasingly interesting, isn't it? The King of Conqueror's eyes gleamed with excitement, beholding a new world filled with challenges and opportunities. Become my subordinate, Caster, the King of Conquerors suddenly declared, his voice filled with authority and expectation. His gaze fixed on Weiss, as if awaiting his submission. I refuse, Weiss replied simply and decisively, without the slightest hesitation. The King of Conquerors, unfazed by the rejection, smiled faintly and said, sure enough, heroic spirits aren't so easy to conquer, but we can join forces, Weiss suggested. Team up, the King of Conquerors spread his arms. Conquer is the only word in my vocabulary. His voice was filled with dominance, as if he were an invincible king. Then you will definitely lose, Weiss said flatly. The King of Conquerors' expression grew serious, his eyes filled with vigilance. Are you challenging me? His voice was filled with authority. Gilgamesh and Sabe are not easy to deal with. Gilgamesh, the King of Conquerors pondered for a moment, then suddenly realized, ah, you mean that guy with an insane amount of noble phantasms? That's quite a description. He burst into laughter. What a fitting nickname for him. That guy is indeed a formidable one, but I'm the King of Conquerors. Iskander was always confident in his own strength. The opponent is the King of Heroes, Gilgamesh. Weiss didn't hide anything, revealing Gilgamesh's identity. Initially, to curb the growing power of humanity following its successive reproduction, the ancient gods united the royal families of the human race with the goddesses, creating Gilgamesh, the wedge through which the gods controlled humanity. He was a hero born between gods and humans, possessing the supreme divine power of 2/3 god, 1/3 human, and possessing the perspectives of both gods and humans. The term King of Heroes doesn't mean King of Heroes but King of Heroes. He is the source of all myths and the template for heroes, and it's no exaggeration to say so. Weiss seemed to be recounting a legendary story. Iskander's expression grew serious, his eyes filled with thought. King of Heroes, no matter what class he descends into, he can unleash overwhelming combat power. Although you are powerful, you are no match for him. You have no chance of winning. Weiss ignored Iskander's grim expression. So, are you trustworthy? Iskander pointed his finger at Weiss. You haven't revealed your identity yet, Caster. His voice was filled with questioning, as if demanding a reasonable explanation. I'm just a mere insignificant magician. You can call me Weiss. His departure heightened the tension, as if a storm were brewing. Rider, why don't you agree to join forces? The enemy is that Gilgamesh, Waver shouted, his voice filled with anxiety and worry. He couldn't understand the King of Conquerors' decision. In his view, facing such a powerful enemy, joining forces was the only option. What? Are you scared? The King of Conquerors' voice was filled with sarcasm. How could that be? Waver said stubbornly, but his body was honest and trembling. His eyes were filled with fear, worried about the battle ahead. Ha! Iskander's broad palm slapped Waver's thin shoulder, and Waver almost fell to the ground. I don't trust that guy. I can sense that he's hiding a lot. The King of Conquerors looked at the place where Weiss had disappeared. Weiss returned to his own space. He frowned slightly, lost in thought. Gilgamesh and Saber have no weaknesses, making them a real challenge. We must capture the leader first. If we kill their masters, they will naturally withdraw from the Holy Grail War. His eyes flickered with thought as he pondered how to deal with these two powerful and troublesome heroic spirits. Alternatively, he could wait for others to fight and reap the benefits. However, monitoring the movements of all heroic spirits and masters was a challenge. The masters have been very restrained tonight. This isn't good. Weiss shook his head slightly, pacing back and forth, his mind racing through various possibilities. He decided to attack Gilgamesh directly and summoned Matalkaria. Matalkaria excitedly grasped Weiss's arms. Of course I know the address of the Tosaka family. Matalkaria's voice trembled slightly with excitement. Are you going to attack Tosaka Tokiyami? His face displayed a complex expression, a mixture of anticipation and worry. I just think everyone's been too restrained. We need to add fuel to the fire. Weiss's lips curled up slightly. He wanted to break this dull situation and make the Holy Grail War more intense and unpredictable. Great, Matalkaria shouted excitedly. He saw the hope of revenge. He didn't care what specific plan Weiss had. In his heart, any action against Tosaka Tokiyami would be his unwavering support. Tasuke Tokiyami was his enemy, the source of his pain. As long as he could make Tasuke Tokiyami pay the price, he was willing to do anything. Chapter 223 Gift. Matao Korea burst into conversation, eagerly unloading everything he knew about the Tasuke residence. His expression was intense, his eyes gleaming with intense desire and urgency. He spoke at a rapid pace, each word gushing from the depths of his heart, as if afraid that any slowness would delay his chance for revenge. His words flowed like a rushing stream, detailing the location of the Tasuke residence, its surroundings, possible defenses, and what he knew of Tasuke Tokiyami's daily movements. His hands waved frequently to punctuate his description, attempting to convey his hatred for Tasuke Tokiyami and his thirst for revenge to Weiss through this information. Weiss listened quietly to Matao Korea's account, his expression focused and calm. As Matao Korea spoke, his mind gradually formed a complete picture of the Tasuke residence and possible courses of action. His plan gradually took shape, every detail carefully considered. He narrowed his eyes slightly, considering the various possibilities and risks. His fingers tapped the tabletop, a slow, rhythmic rhythm. He had planned to give the Tasuke a grand gift early in the morning. The first rays of morning sunlight streamed across the Tasuke's garden like golden threads, bathing it in a warm glow. Tasuke Tokiyami stood at the window, leisurely gazing at the beautiful scenery outside. His expression betrayed a confidence and composure, a certainty about the Holy Grail War. He believed no one could stand against Gilgamesh, the Hero King's immense strength filling him with confidence. A faint smile lifted his lips. The coffee cup on the table began to vibrate slightly, and then the entire villa began to shake. Earthquake, was Tasuke Tokiyami's first reaction, a hint of confusion crossing his face. He set down his coffee cup and felt the vibrations beneath his feet. The sky suddenly darkened, the sunlight obscured by something. Startled, Tasuke Tokiyami quickly ran outside and gazed up at the sky. At that moment, a cold sweat broke out on his face. A meteorite, larger than the villa, plummeted from the sky towards them. Its immense mass resembled a mountain about to descend, imposing an overwhelming sense of oppression. Is this an attack? His mind still hadn't fully registered, his eyes filled with astonishment and disbelief. He stared blankly at the meteorite in the sky, his heart filled with fear and confusion. Idiot! Gilgamesh's voice raged from the rooftop, a voice filled with anger and disdain. Your Majesty, Tasuke Tokiyami instinctively knelt on one knee upon hearing Gilgamesh's voice, awaiting the king's command. Gilgamesh didn't even glance at him, his attention completely focused on the approaching meteorite. Finally, Tokiyami reacted, Your Majesty, I beg you to intervene. Gilgamesh's gaze fell upon him, filled with coldness and majesty. Tasuke Tokiyami lowered his head, not daring to look Gilgamesh in the eye. Gilgamesh soared into the air, countless noble phantasms shooting towards the meteorite like meteors. Boom! A massive explosion echoed as the meteorite deviated from its trajectory and began to disintegrate, shattering into countless pieces of rubble. These fragments rained down around the Tasuke residence, creating deep craters. Each shard dug a crater in the ground, sending up clouds of dust, smoke, and thick plumes. Jin Shanshan had just landed on the rooftop, his golden figure gleaming majestically in the sunlight. He raised his chin slightly, his eyes revealing an unwavering arrogance. However, before he could fully steady himself, a blazing beam of light shot towards him like lightning. The beam was dazzling, like a ray of destructive force radiating from the sun, carrying a chilling heat and immense power. It moved so fast that no one had time to react. Almost the instant the beam appeared, a shield appeared before them. The shield, gleaming with golden light and engraved with mysterious runes, was forged from the strongest metal. However, the power of the blazing beam was too great. After just a few seconds, the shield shattered like fragile glass, shattering into countless shards. The fragments flew everywhere, gleaming with golden light in the sunlight. Interesting, Gilgamesh's lips curled up slightly, a smile of interest forming. His eyes sparkled with excitement. Instantly, a larger, sturdier golden shield appeared in his hand. This one was even more ornate than the previous one, its runes more complex. Let me witness this move. His voice was filled with confidence and arrogance, confident that he could easily withstand any attack, no matter how powerful. However, his ever-present arrogance had led him to underestimate the power of this blow. When the beam struck the shield again, the immense force instantly sent Gilgamesh and his shield flying backwards. The immense force instantly pierced the villa's wall, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. Tasuke Tokiyami froze, his eyes filled with astonishment and fear. He had never imagined a king of heroes could be sent flying. His mind went blank, unsure how to react to the situation. At that moment, Weiss suddenly appeared before him. Oh no, a strong sense of danger surged through Tasuka Tokimi. Weiss's attack was aimed at his life. Avada, eat the big melon. The instantaneous death curse, coupled with the close proximity, made it impossible for Tasuka Tokimi to dodge. The green light, like a messenger of death, hurtled towards him. Archer, save me. In desperation, Tasuka Tokimi activated the command seals. With a flash of light, Gilgamesh appeared before him in an instant. The death curse struck Gilgamesh's armor, deflecting it, the green light vanishing into thin air. Scum! Gilgamesh's face darkened, his eyes filled with rage. As a king, being ordered around by a subject was a profound humiliation. He made no effort to conceal his murderous intent, the powerful aura spread outward like a surging tide. Tasuka Tokimi immediately dropped to his knees and explained, King, we were in a desperate situation. His voice trembled, filled with fear and anxiety. Jin Shanshan extended his right hand, and a sword appeared. The sword radiated a cold light, instantly piercing Tasuka Tokimi's left shoulder, and blood flowed to the ground. Tasuka Tokimi dared not resist, nor did he dare to speak, silently enduring the blow. He knew that any resistance would only anger the King of Heroes, leading to even more serious consequences. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224, Fight Again. Get out, Gilgamesh roared, his voice resounding like thunder, brimming with rage and authority. He kicked Tasuka Tokimi, sending him flying like a kite with its string cut. He arced through the air before landing heavily on the ground with a dull thud. Tasuka Tokimi groaned in pain, struggling to stand, but the pain in his body made it nearly impossible to move. His face was pale, his eyes filled with fear and despair. He knew he had become insignificant in this battle and needed to get away from the battlefield as soon as possible to avoid further harm. Gritting his teeth and mustering all his strength, he struggled to his feet and limped off into the distance. You're such a grump, Weiss teased, his eyes full of amusement. Don't you like my gift? His voice held a hint of provocation, deliberately provoking Gilgamesh. He knew Gilgamesh was a proud and conceited person, prone to losing his composure and revealing his flaws with the slightest provocation. Gilgamesh turned his gaze towards Weiss, eyes filled with rage and murderous intent. His gaze was like two sharp swords, piercing Weiss's heart. Without warning, he launched his attack. Countless noble phantasms rained down upon Weiss like a torrential rain, swift as lightning. They shimmered in the air with a golden glow, emanating a powerful aura that seemed capable of destroying everything. However, Weiss had a plan for countering them. Your attack is too simple, he said with confidence. The king's treasure could instantly kill ordinary heroes and heroic spirits, but it was no match for Weiss. Weiss kept teleporting, and Gilgamesh's attacks were completely missed. His presence was like a ghost, elusive. He cast magical counterattacks, but they proved powerless to penetrate Weiss's defenses. While Weiss's magic was powerful, Gilgamesh's defenses were equally impenetrable. For a moment, neither could defeat the other, and they were locked in a stalemate. Scum! Gilgamesh roared, and a long chain materialized behind him. The chain shone with a golden glow, engraved with mysterious runes, the chain of heaven. This was Gilgamesh's favorite noble phantasm. It served as a warning to the gods: the higher the divine power of the captive, the stronger the chain, making it increasingly difficult to break free. It was a rare weapon capable of restraining even gods. This meant it was a powerful artifact capable of binding even gods. It seemed to possess a consciousness of its own, independent of Gilgamesh's control. Like a nimble snake, it constantly slithered through the space, capturing Weiss. As it moved, Weiss noticed his apparition becoming increasingly difficult. The nearby space has been sealed off. Weiss wasn't surprised, it was a weapon against gods. After all, we need to change our tactics. Weiss stopped apparitioning. Scum! Gilgamesh remained as arrogant as ever, his eyes filled with disdain. Knowing you can't escape the chain of heaven, you gave up resistance. His voice was thick with sarcasm. Of course, Weiss wouldn't surrender. The show has just begun. As Weiss finished speaking, the ground began to tremble and warp. He began to rub his hands together, casting a powerful spell. The entire earth transformed into various forms in response to his movements, like a vast amusement park. Gilgamesh floated into the air, folding his arms. Interesting acrobatics. His voice was filled with contempt, mocking Weiss's magic as mere trifles. Matter for kilometers in radius was now under Weiss's control. Countless rock arms stretched toward the sky, capturing Gilgamesh. These arms were immense, like demonic hands from hell. Gilgamesh sat calmly on his throne, his head propped up by his arms. The heavenly chains surrounded him like loyal guards. The rock arms shattered with dull clinks as they touched the heavenly chains. Not only were the heavenly chains' offensive attributes fully maxed out, but their defensive properties were also fully maxed out. Gilgamesh was like a spectator enjoying a magic show. Weiss constantly shifted his gestures, chanting incantations. Dozens of streams of light swirled around Gilgamesh, emitting powerful energy waves. Gilgamesh's face darkened. He could sense the terrifying power contained within these streams of light. He rose from his throne, his eyes filled with alarm. Star of Destruction, Weiss uttered these 4 words, his voice deep and powerful, announcing the impending catastrophe. These streams of light formed a hexagram-shaped magic circle, encircling Gilgamesh. The circle exuded a powerful aura, as if capable of destroying everything. Speaking of the beginning, the separation of heaven and earth, the creation of the world without a single word, severing the world is my sort of separation, Gilgamesh muttered, his voice filled with majesty and dominance. The mortar of the stars, the hell above, is the endpoint on the eve of creation. I submit to death, the star of the separation and creation of heaven and earth. The two powerful forces collided, emitting a light more dazzling than the sun. It was as if a second sun had appeared in the sky, its radiance impossible to gaze upon. The power was so astonishing that all surrounding matter was reduced to dust. Dozens of assassin clones, observing from the shadows, were caught in this swarm, unable to escape. The other heroic spirits also fled to avoid being affected. The storm gradually subsided, its violent force receding like a tide, leaving behind only silence and desolation. A vast crater, bottomless and deep, appeared at the center of the Tossica family. A vast pit, like the entrance to hell, appeared to be barren for 3 kilometers. The land, churned and plowed like a giant plow, was charred and devastated. The air was thick with the smell of dust and gunpowder, reminiscent of a post-apocalyptic battlefield. You've allowed me to draw the sword of separation, Gilgamesh said, his chin raised slightly, a subtle glint of admiration in his golden eyes. You've qualified as a clown? His voice remained haughty and arrogant. However, for Gilgamesh, this was a rare compliment. Ordinary magic simply cannot penetrate the heavenly chain's defenses. Weiss pondered to himself. A hint of solemnity lingered in his eyes. This battle was proving more difficult than he'd imagined. The sky chain's powerful defense repeatedly frustrated his magical attacks, forcing him to find a new way to overcome this predicament. Hope everything goes well with Mataukaria. Weiss was still preoccupied with another battleground. He still had plenty of magic power. Delay Gilgamesh to buy Mataukaria some time. Chapter 225 Old Grudges. Oh, you still have some energy left. Jin Shanshan's lips curled up in a playful smile, a smile that carried a hint of unruly arrogance. His eyes were like sharp blades, staring intently at Weiss, examining an interesting prey. Show off to your heart's content, your tricks are brilliant. His eyes gleamed with excitement, as if he was expecting Weiss to bring more surprises. It had been a long time since Gilgamesh had encountered an opponent as interesting as Weiss. This mysterious caster, possessing powerful magical powers and strange magic, gave him a long-awaited challenge. He longed for a real battle, a battle where he could fully unleash his power. The two began their second round. The air was filled with tension, as if a storm was about to break out. Their eyes met, sparking a fierce spark, as if announcing the cruelty and intensity of this battle. Time flashed back to when Tossica Tokiyami was fleeing. He clutched his injured arm, a pained expression on his face. Gilgamesh's kick had caused internal bleeding in him, and if left untreated, the injury would worsen, weakening his combat effectiveness. In the Holy Grail War, any mistake could have serious consequences. Moreover, Tossica Tokiyami was a perfectionist and would never allow himself any flaws in battle. All the healing potions have been destroyed. I'll have to ask Kairi for help. Tossica Tokiyami pondered this inwardly. A hint of anxiety lingered in his eyes. The course of this battle had exceeded his expectations. He had to find a cure and restore his strength quickly, or he would be at a significant disadvantage in this brutal Holy Grail war. As Tasuke Tokiyami pondered this, someone blocked his path. Who is it? He gripped his cane tightly. The oversized ruby at the tip of the cane contained the magical power that Tokiyami had spent a lifetime cultivating. It was Tasuke Tokiyami's formal attire. Mato Korea removed his hat, revealing a pale, exhausted face. Long time no see, Tokiyami. His voice carried a hint of bitterness and sarcasm. Still as arrogant as ever, Mato Korea said self-deprecatingly. Well, after all, I'm the Mato family's worthless one. His eyes were filled with resentment and unwillingness, recalling the pain and humiliation of the past. Mato Korea. Tasuke Tokiyami looked at the white-haired Mato Korea, his heart filled with surprise. He had never thought that he would meet Mato Korea here, the man whom he once regarded as a waste. You used the marking bug. Tasuke Tokiyami looked at Mato Korea's twisted body and pale face. He knew that the marking bug was an extremely evil magic that would bring great pain and torture to the user. Caster is your servant, and you really let your Mato family summon a powerful heroic spirit? Tasuke Tokiyami kept observing the surrounding environment, his heart full of vigilance. Where is Mato Zouken? Where is he hiding? He didn't believe that Mato Korea came alone, nor did he believe that he could deal with his own strength. In his opinion, Mato Korea was just a puppet controlled by the marking bug, and there must be Mato Zouken manipulating him behind the scenes. You are still so annoying. Mato Korea stopped talking nonsense. He raised his hand and summoned a group of winged blade insects. Those winged blade insects shone with metallic luster in the sunlight, and the long poisonous stingers and sharp claws on their tails made people shudder. Buzz buzz, the wings vibrated the air, making a harsh sound that made people's eardrums hurt. The winged blade insects rushed towards Tasuke Tokiyami like a black whirlwind. Stupid. Tasuke Tokiyami waved the cane in his hand, and flames surrounded him. The flames were like a ferocious dragon, instantly burning all the winged blade insects to death. The air was filled with the aroma of barbecue. Tasuke Tokiyami's magic attribute is fire, and with a conversion magic characteristic passed down by the Tasuke family, he can use magic that uses this characteristic to store his magic power in the gem, and then take it out to use magic when needed. If a large amount of magic power is stored in the gem in advance, it is possible to perform large-scale magic without using one's own magic power. Tasuke Tokiyami can be said to be the nemesis of the insect user, and no matter how many winged blade insects Mato Korea summons, it will be useless. Catch Mato Korea and control him. Tasuke Tokiyami secretly calculated in his heart. However, what he did not notice was that the soil under his feet began to loosen. Until he felt a hint of pain, he looked down and saw that his legs were already densely covered with insects. Is this a new variety bred by the Mato family? Tasuke Tokiyami was full of doubts. These insects were the scarabs that Weiss gave to Mato Korea. Weiss's strength no longer allowed them to be used, but for Mato Korea, they were a great help. Sure enough, due to the lack of intelligence, Tasuke Tokiyami fell into the trap. After Weiss's improvement, the scarabs could withstand high temperatures and were not afraid of the burning of ordinary flames. Intensive Inasharung, give my enemy a harsh cremation. After chanting the 2-bar spell, a magic circle in the shape of the Tasuke family crest appeared at his feet. The flames rushed towards the scarabs in waves like snakes. This time the scarabs could not resist and were all burned to death. However, Tasuke Tokiyami's right leg had been bitten. He had never been so embarrassed before, and the wound on his shoulder was still bleeding, making him feel dizzy. The situation is too unfavorable. A strong sense of crisis surged in Tasuke Tokiyami's heart. His body was constantly suffering damage, and Mato Korea was getting more and more crazy. While dodging Mato Korea's attacks, he racked his brains to think of a way to escape. Haha, seeing Tasuke Tokiyami's embarrassed appearance, Mato Korea laughed wildly. His face was distorted, and his eyes were full of the pleasure of revenge. He seemed to have seen Tasuke Tokiyami's failure and despair, and his heart was full of satisfaction. He attacked more vigorously, wanting to vent all his hatred on Tasuke Tokiyami. What's wrong? Fight me head-on. Mato Korea loudly challenged Tasuke Tokiyami. However, his provocation was too cheap, and Tasuke Tokiyami saw through his intention at a glance. Tasuke Tokiyami remained calm, knowing that in this situation, any impulse could lead to fatal consequences. He silently observed Mato Korea's attack methods, looking for flaws and opportunities. Mato Korea, this pitiful man who was teased by fate, is not even a third-rate magician. His magic power comes from the engraved insects, which gives him a certain amount of power, but also causes his body to suffer endless pain. His attack mode is single and there is no rule to speak of. Every attack is based on the anger and hatred in his heart, releasing the insects he summoned without any strategy. His attacks are as fierce as a storm, but lack precision and coherence. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.